September 22nd, 2023 to be deferred. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby deferred.
President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, report from select committees, first reading of bills.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2023, as well as the first reading of the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order 2018 Validation Bill 2023.
Recording in progress.
The question is that the aforementioned bills be read the first time. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and obituary speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Or replies to questions. Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir?
Government Business is the order of the day.
Order number 9, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2023.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that orders number 9 and number 10 be done as a cognate debate.
The question is that orders number 9 and 10 on the order paper be a cognate debate, given the fact that they're inextricably linked. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Orders number 9 and 10 shall be done as a cognate debate.
Mr. Speaker, I appreciate the giving way to allow these two bills to be done as a cognate debate. I rise this morning to introduce amendments, first of all, to the Road Traffic Amendment Bill. I want to start by indicating, Mr. Speaker, that I think the Road Traffic Act has been amended perhaps more than any other piece of legislation in our history. Not just here, but across the world. It is one of those pieces of legislation that is extremely dynamic and one that from time to time we are constantly coming to the House of Parliament in order to make the necessary amendments to. As we try to modernize the laws relating to road traffic and road safety, we find ourselves compelled constantly to make, as we upgrade certainly a lot of the technology related to the Barbados Licensing Authority in particular, we are often compelled to have to come back to Parliament in order to make the necessary changes to that piece of legislation. It is certainly my hope that within the next few months that we're able to not only make some significant changes and reform of the laws relating to Road Traffic Act, but also certainly the Highways Act as well, which are very outdated, is another outdated piece of legislation that is on the statute books. And we have a team within the ministry working very closely with CPC to be able to make those amendments to bring it within the 21st century. Now, these amendments this morning are very simple amendments, but simple sometimes also means that they have very significant impact They're both examples, Mr. Speaker, of, I think, a government that has listened to the people in terms of concerns relating, first of all, to the Barbados Licensing Authority and the ability of the staff of the licensing authority to be able to ease doing business at that institution and to improve and to modernize the way in which it interfaces with the public of Barbados. The other piece of, the other portion of the amendment relates to representations made by the Barbados Association of Retired Persons in relation to the driver's licenses and receiving driver's licenses for elderly persons. And a lot of advocacy has taken place on their part in relation to asking this administration to make the changes to accommodate our elderly persons. So I will start first of all, Mr. Speaker, with decisions that were taken by the Cabinet of Barbados back in 2021, where we looked first of all at addressing the backlog, the long lines that often we find ourselves complaining about over at the Pine location. We had a situation, as you can appreciate, that when we abolished the road tax and we introduced the fuel tax, it meant that the weighing of vehicles, which in many cases was the principal location for weighing of those vehicles was at the Pine location, that we pretty much saw that it became unnecessary to be able to engage in that activity in the way that we did before, because that was for the purpose then of being able to impose a levy for road taxes and registration fees on vehicles. So with the abolition of the road tax, and moving towards a fuel tax, it did not make any sense having to use that methodology of weighing to be able to determine the rates that persons ought to be able to pay. Now, when we determined that we would move from the road tax to replace it with a fuel tax, it also meant that the annual payment of road taxes would have been abolished except for commercial and public service vehicles. And it should be noted that all new registrants of vehicles, including private vehicle owners, are, however, still required to pay road tax when registering a vehicle for the first time. The changes that we made also resulted in the cessation of weighing of vehicles for the purposes, as I said, of levying road taxes and registration, with the exception of new vehicles, commercial vehicles, and public service vehicles, or PSVs. So we recognized that there was a problem, and discussions would have started back in 2020 with the automobile dealers across the country to ascertain their views in terms of the examination of, as well as the issuance of roadworthy certificates for private vehicles by private garages and workshops. For the most part, there had been a trend developing in the sector, especially with the insurance companies, where they were inspecting the vehicles, they were issuing the roadworthy certificates. And really, again, in response to what was happening, because I think oftentimes the public or the companies across Barbados may move a little faster than we were able to make the changes in terms of the legislation. Those consultations that took place with the automobile associations allowed us to have a better appreciation of what was possible and certainly how we could embark on a journey that would allow business to be a bit more simpler for average Barbadians having to interface with the Barbados Licensing Authority. Arising from those discussions, a number of recommendations were made. First of all, one of the recommendations was to look at the privatization of the weighing of new private vehicles. Also, coming out of those discussions was to address the removal of the requirement for weight certificates for new private and commercial vehicles. And thirdly, they also wanted to introduce a new automated system which would be accessible to the automobile dealers as well as the Barbados Revenue Authority and the Barbados Licensing Authority. And why? Again, so that the process would be seamless. That I think we can appreciate that as we try to move away from a paper system where people are writing everything down and then somebody has to go through traffic and certainly have to inspect documents. That if we had an automated system which all of these agencies could access, that it would make it certainly a lot simpler for them to be able to inspect and to look at the vehicles and be able to enter that information in real time and allow for the relevant institutions to have access to that information. Currently, our new private vehicles are only required to be examined for the initial registration. But however, used private and commercial vehicles still have to be weighed and examined prior to initial registration on account of a change of ownership, where there's a total loss or write-off of a vehicle due to an accident that is still roadworthy, and where vehicles were being examined for insurance purposes. What we found at the Barbados Licensing Authority, though, was that on several occasions when the vehicles were examined at the location in the Pine, a number of discrepancies arose in terms of the chassis numbers and the engine numbers. In many cases, they had been altered, obviously in many cases for fraudulent means being committed by the persons who had made the changes. And in many cases, that information had not been updated or been notified to the Barbados Licensing Authority. So they were discovering what was transpiring for the very first time. And in many cases, the police would recognize that offenses were being committed by vehicles that did not align with what was in their records. And so this was of great concern to the Barbados Licensing Authority. Coming out of the discussions with the Automobile Association and the private dealers in particular, it was recommended that the private motor vehicles that are 10 years or older, as well as used commercial vehicles, should be examined by authorized private garages, whereas the Barbados Licensing Authority would continue to inspect and to examine other vehicles. Now, under the current legislation, the only entity that can actually carry out this type of inspection by law is actually the Barbados Licensing Authority. But what the amendment this morning seeks to do is to allow for the inclusion now of a definition in the road traffic bill to allow us to define an approved garage. In this case, the approved garage would be a garage which is approved by the minister in accordance with Section 3.3 of the new legislation. And that approved garage, Mr. Speaker, now gives a second option to the general public to be able to not only go to the Pine location, but to allow the services that would have been carried out in the Pine to now be carried out at various other approved garages across the island. How does that impact the general public, Mr. Speaker? Well, I anticipate that a number of these approved garages will take advantage of this opportunity. They obviously already are in the business of doing the inspections, but they now can offer the service, allowing persons through the booking of appointments, ideally to be able to make appointments to have their vehicles inspected at their convenience for the appropriate fee. Section 3.1 of the bill proposes to repeal and replace Section 3 of the existing Road Traffic Act, and giving the BLA now the authority, obviously, to have another player within the market or players within the market to be able to assist them in carrying out their functions. Now, once this legislation is passed, it is the intention of the Barbados Licensing Authority to also have what is referred to as an approved garages designation order also made, which will identify a number of the approved garages that persons can go to in order to have these services provided. Now, our transport inspectors currently have already started that process. They have been engaging with a number of the garages and as well as the Automobile Association. They have been inspecting the premises of a number of the garages. We've started to compile our lists because there are a few that have already met the respective criteria. I am told that in terms of the checklist, obviously what they are looking for is to make sure that the entities have enclosed locations where, again, these services can be provided, that the entities are also keeping proper records and proper books, because that is important in terms of utilizing the automated system, making sure that they are compliant with the law as it relates to CAIPO, that they are paid up in terms of their taxes. Obviously, they have to have the necessary equipment to be able to inspect the vehicles. So in particular, they must have the hoist and all of the other equipment that is necessary. They should also have adequate staffing, because this creates, just as it does for Barbados Licensing Authority, an administrative function. Somebody has to make the appointment, somebody has to receive the persons when they visit the respective garages, just as they do at Licensing Authority. Then somebody has to be responsible for the inspection. There has to be somewhere for the persons to wait while the inspection is actually taking place. So we have to make sure that we improve not only the service at the Barbados Licensing Authority, but that we also put in place the appropriate mechanisms at the garages that would allow persons the comfort of being able to, not have the bottleneck in the Pine location as we currently do. And of course, making sure that those entities have the appropriate cleaning facilities as well is also important, in addition to having drive-through areas for the vehicles to come through. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that this speaks to a level of modernization of the Barbados Licensing Authority which is taking place. I know that there has been much criticism about the entity. Certainly when I became minister, that criticism, I think, started with the concerns about at the time it was the Barbados Revenue Authority having challenges in relation to termite infestation in one of the buildings at the site. They had, raised some issues of environmental concerns. It created, again, a huge bottleneck at the Pine location, inconveniencing a lot of the public. And it is regrettable that those things took place, but I am pleased that we've been able to bring a resolution to those issues. BRA is comfortably now back in the space, and we are working through some of the teething issues to ensure that there is a smooth process when people visit the Pine location. One of the things, Mr. Speaker, that the public, I think, sometimes misappreciates is the relationship between the Barbados Licensing Authority and the Barbados Revenue Authority. In many cases, because you're coming to the Pine, you simply assume, for the most part, that all services being offered in the Pine location are services being offered by the Barbados Licensing Authority. And that is actually not quite accurate, because the Barbados Revenue Authority, while it is in the location of the Pine, and it is responsible for collecting the fees, they collect the money. The Barbados Licensing Authority doesn't collect the money. So the public may not realize that that first interface is actually with BRA, which happens to be at the Barbados Licensing Authority offices. And so we're dealing with two different systems, which we have to obviously ensure that they are talking to each other. That has had its challenges, because I think you can appreciate it is two different entities with different ways of dealing with things. We've had to engage in a number of discussions with them to understand that it is not just about collecting revenue. You are dealing with human beings, you're dealing with people who are coming to get their vehicles sorted out and to have them inspected and to offer services. And generally people are looking for a certain level of customer care and attention to be paid to people when they come to conduct the services. Again, as I keep saying, we do have to see people and we have to treat the people in a way that we would expect to be treated ourselves. So we started that process there. As I said, BRA has settled in nicely. We're working through the teething issues between BRA and Barbados Licensing Authority. There are also plans to be able to have a customer service area in one of the spaces next door to the Barbados Revenue Authority, where it presently is in the Pine. And why, Mr. Speaker? Because again, it is important that when people come, not just asking questions regarding garages and where they can have their vehicles inspected, but when they have general concerns on the premises, to be able to allow for persons to work with them to be able to fill out the forms online and to be able to ask a myriad of questions that, again, the public may have. As much as we say we have all of the new technology and you can go online to be able to access a lot of the services in government, there are still people, especially our elderly people, who still prefer the interface with a human being. And we are mindful of that. So while we encourage the transition to online, I think the Barbados Licensing Authority recognizes as well that there must be an opportunity for people to still come and to wait in comfort, and also to be in a position to have those services delivered to them, certainly in a timely manner as well, with the necessary technology being in place for the general public. So we are making improvements there. It is our hope that by the end of this year, we can have that call center in place. On the horizon as well, we want to be able to have a call center where again, a lot of the queries, if you're using the technology online, that you can make those calls after hours, so that I don't have to, Mrs. Speaker, constantly be reading about the concerns that people have on a Facebook post. Or getting a text message, but really that we respond to persons, that there's somebody on the other end of the line that is able to address the concerns of long waiting times, what documents you are supposed to bring or to supply for whatever service it is that is being requested of the Barbados Licensing Authority. So those changes, Mr. Speaker, are in the woodworks. I think this speaks to also a direction of modernization that is taking place across all of government. I know CAIPO is moving in the direction of a call center. I believe the QEH is also exploring options in relation to having, the persons being able to interface with the public to ask the important questions about their care, for instance. And it would take some of what I consider a lot of the heavy load off of the officers whose workload has really increased because of the additional work that they're having to do on a day-to-day basis, because we have more cars on the road. So if you have more cars on the road, there's no more services being provided by the Barbados Licensing Authority. And it therefore has come to make more sense for us to, as a government, to recognize that not all things can be done by the same officers that we are constantly requesting of them, but in some cases we need to allow a different level of interface to be taking place so that the public does not, indicate their frustration in the way that often that they do. So we're working on also modernizing our databases so that persons can interface online, those who wish to do so, that they can again pay for the services online. Of course, that takes time in terms of being able to make the transition. We are, I think, as you know, Mr. Speaker, moving in the direction of introducing an electronic vehicle registration system. The legislation for that should shortly be coming. It is with CPC. We've been back and forth with the ministry and CPC to fine-tune, again, further amendments in terms of certainly the Road Traffic Act. But I am happy that there has been a certain level of compliance by the general public in visiting a number of the centers, the EVR centers across the island. At first people were a bit concerned about, there's no law in place, so why are we going to do it? But I had the opportunity with the Honourable Member for St. Andrew recently to visit a number of the EVR centers and to see firsthand that, first of all, the process doesn't take very long. Within 7 to 10 minutes, you driving into any of the centers, you have the ability to have your vehicle registered, have the ID tag placed on the vehicle, drive through the gantry to make sure that the facility is working, and for the system to upload and to recognize that this vehicle has all of the relevant insurance and registration that is necessary to be safe on the road, sir. Now, again, with any technology, you have to make sure that there are lots of moving parts. There are a lot of different agencies that we have to work with in order to get this up and running. And that is constantly a work in progress. I believe the gantries, most people can see the gantries are in across the country. We're in the process. There's a team in now trying to make sure that we can get the cameras and to make sure that we can get those fully functioning. And I would want to, sir, certainly, sir, take this opportunity to encourage those who may not have already visited the EVR centers to do so. It's very straightforward in terms of the documentation that you are required to take. And as I said before, the waiting times are not as long as some may think. I actually get a lot of messages from people who are surprised that the process is rather seamless. And I would want to thank all of those persons working at the EVR centers for the work that they're doing in terms of moving the process along. And I anticipate that as we get closer to having the final draft of the EVR legislation, that we will start to see a ramping up, certainly, of the number of individuals visiting the EVR centers to get the vehicles registered. EVR will obviously impact significantly on what we're speaking about today in terms of particularly vehicles coming into the country, because at the ports of entry, you will immediately be able to have all of this registration done in terms of the chassis number and the engine number. So again, technology will, in a sense, remove some of the requirements that we have now for weighing of vehicles, especially new vehicles coming into the country, because it is going to provide a more efficient service from the time that vehicles land within the port. But we still need to make sure that in the interim that we have these approved garages that are able to assist the licensing authority in dealing with the backlog that currently exists at the Pine location. As we modernize, obviously, it requires us to make sure that our staff are also properly equipped. I recognize, Mr. Speaker, that in many cases the BLA, it holds a lot of licks, but if I am fair, I think that we've had a period where the level of training and dedicated resources to be able to improve the skill set of the staff has not really been happening. Fortunately, we've been taking that a bit more serious recently and encouraging a lot of the staff to upskill so that they are able to deliver a better service. The other thing is that some of the conditions, not just at where BRA was, but in the other areas where the testing officers were, are not conditions that I would have to say that you can blame them sometimes if they're a little frustrated. And we have been in discussions with housing to help us to make some improvements to certainly the testing process where persons coming to the licensing authority to obtain a driver's license. You will notice that the signage at times is totally confusing. We know it's licensing authority, but in many cases, when you get there, you're never quite sure where to go unless somebody is telling you where you're supposed to go. So those are little things that they may seem like small things, but in many cases, they are the things that create the frustration. I recall as well that we had to introduce a ramp leading from the testing office building going over to the BRA offices. And why? Because certainly when I became minister, I found that all of the elderly people in particular were having to walk through mud. Me and my high heel shoes, I was finding that I had to walk through mud to get from one area to the next. It is simple things like that that makes the experience, especially if you have to wait a long time, a little bit more palatable for the general public. And I think across the board, I know we across government, we're trying to improve the conditions and the delivery of services, not just the aesthetics, but generally the flow of traffic through a number of our offices as we seek to modernize the location. The other thing, Mr. Speaker, that I would want to mention is that, it wasn't so long ago that I applied for a driver's license and had to go into that Pine location in order to traverse. It was almost as though they tried to fail you before you could get outside of the Pine location. I don't feel that in a 2023 Barbados that we ought to be putting our learner drivers through the same thing. Just because we did it doesn't mean that it is the right thing to do. That location is extremely confused in terms of persons coming in, very nervous oftentimes to be able to get their license. And you have all of these various services taking place and almost a crisscross of learner driver and instructor trying to get out of the back of the yard to the front of the yard in the hope that they can actually get out of the yard to go on the road to pass their tests. Sir, I think we can certainly accept that the time has now come for us to reorganize the licensing authority space to make it more efficient and more effective for those who have to do business there. And I hope that we can bring an end to that fairly soon. The architects are working with the Ministry of Housing, looking at some designs to redesign the space. I'm hopeful that we can acquire some buildings once we're able to relocate a few of the staff to other locations with the help of Senior Minister, and that we would be able to make the space there more comfortable. Even in terms of people when they are waiting, a lot of people are waiting in their vehicles. Outside is very, very hot. Many people may not have the air conditioning working for different reasons. I know that my Chief Licensing Officer Acton is also embarking on utilizing a space that had previously only stored oil files and I guess oil drums and all kinds of things that ought not to be in this space. These are the things that we are seeking to do to improve the experience at BLA. So I hear the public loudly in terms of the concerns. I hear it from my colleagues from time to time in terms of concerns there. But I want to assure you that that process of modernization and reducing the wait times at the Barbados Licensing Authority is in motion. And again, we welcome the criticism. We welcome certainly a pat on the back when there are things that are running smooth, but it is a work in progress in terms of upgrading the technology to be able to make us more efficient. So, Mr. Speaker, I would want that as we improve with the technology, that we are better able to deliver these services. This, I think, in terms of this First Amendment, will certainly bring great improvement to the system. Obviously, it has to go through the Senate, has to be proclaimed, and the various orders will need to be put in place in order to move us in the direction that we need to. But the public can be assured that that first step has taken place, in a sense, to get us where we need to get to. I would just mention as well, in relation to the road traffic regulations, statutory instrument 1984, number 141, we propose to amend that particular section by deleting regulation 14A and then later substituting it with a new 14A, which that provision would now stipulate that private motor vehicles that are 10 years or older and used commercial vehicles will be examined annually on payment of the prescribed fee. The relevant certificate would be issued once the vehicle is deemed to be fit and proper to be on the road. So when you go to whether it's the approved garage or to licensing authority, it either has to be fit for purpose or it is not fit for purpose. If it is fit for purpose, it's simple. You get the issuance of the certificate. If it is not fit for purpose, then the vehicle owner would be informed of any defects and that have been found on the vehicle. They're then given 14 days to correct those defects. And obviously, if you fail to do so within the time frame, you cannot have the vehicle registered by the Barbados Licensing Authority. So I think that is relatively clear in terms of what the process will be, both at the Licensing Authority main office, as well as for the approved garages. The other provision that will come later once this legislation is passed is also that those garages will have to immediately notify the Barbados Licensing Authority after they have carried out their examination of the details of the visit by the person having the inspection carried out. So they are required to submit a form and to submit the contents in a form, again, which is part of the automated system, and that information would then rest with the Barbados Licensing Authority so that we can keep a record of the vehicles that are roadworthy on our roads. Just to say too, Mr. Speaker, that BLA for some time has been in need of additional hoists to be able to carry out its functions. We have finally been able to get the approval to be able to have 3 additional hoists at the BLA, which will increase, obviously, the capacity of BLA to, again, carry out its services. And I'm hopeful that once that is done, that we can have the requisite appointment systems in place. So, again, we don't have the bottlenecks at the point. But this option now gives persons an opportunity to have another location that they can go to. I would want, therefore, at this point, Mr. Speaker, as well, to mention that obviously, at some point, finance will determine, given that there's been some lost revenue from the road taxes, they will determine how they address any increases in fees. At this point, the fees remain as they are. And therefore, I am not in a position to indicate if there's going to be an increase, but suffice to say that obviously with some of the changes administratively, there may be in the future an appreciation that there may have to be some administrative costs that are added on to the actual current costs. Right now, private vehicles, for the first-time registration of new vehicles, they pay $400. And for first-time commercial vehicles, they actually pay $1,000. If I can move, Mr. Speaker, to the other area, which I believe needs to now also be rectified. Recently, colleagues would recall that we held a meeting with the Barbados Association of Retired Persons. It arose out of some concerns that had been expressed regarding our elderly population. I think at the time, the intention, the focus was more around the ID card and the TAP program, and an extension of our dates to be able to allow persons to pin their cards. But we also had some other fruitful discussions relating to some outstanding issues that had been, in a sense, omitted or left to languish for a little bit too long. Currently, we have a situation where the holder of a driving license is a driver's license 70 years of age or over. That license of that holder shall not be renewed unless that person produces a medical certificate which is signed by a medical practitioner as to his or her physical fitness. In addition, the licensing authority may also order that a person of 70 years of age or over has to undergo a test given by the authority in order to ascertain their ability to drive a motor vehicle. And that is obviously if you are seeking a license over that particular age. In any case, currently the license shall not be renewed for more than 1 year at any given time. And we got representations coming into the various ministries from the Barbados Association of Retired Persons that the existing requirements appeared very unfair. There was no evidence to suggest that there was a greater risk of incidences of accidents caused by persons over 70 years versus any other category. And following the discussions then with BAMP, because the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners was also consulted, it was agreed that we could move in the direction of amending the provisions related to the grant of a driver's license to applicants to 75 years of age and not more than 85 years of age for a period not exceeding 2 years from the date of issue. Now, the fact is that even though physical strength, your mental sharpness, and overall health can deteriorate as a person ages, and we all know people whose ability is impacted as a result of their age, the truth is that there is no statistical data to suggest that certain seniors in this category are more prone to cause accidents than younger persons. And I'm sure we will all get to that point at some point, passing the 70 mark. But what we have done, Mr. Speaker, is that Section 7 of the Road Traffic Act will now be amended and substituted with a clause which states as follows, that where the holder of a driving license is A, 75 years of age and not more than 85 years of age, the license of that holder may be renewed for a period not exceeding 2 years from the date of issue. Or B, is if the holder of a driving license is over the age of 85 years of age, the license of that holder may be renewed for a period of 1 year from the date of issue. So we have listened, Mr. Speaker, to both associations, and we're grateful to them for the representations made. I am a firm believer that data must always drive decision-making, and that we must not just simply have knee-jerk reactions where we believe that, you know, some of our elderly who are on the road should not be on the road, and therefore we have to find ways to get them off the road by way of legislation. But in fact, it must be driven by, you know, data and evidence to suggest that in a particular category, accidents are being caused by certain sets of persons, and then our response as legislators is to ensure that we protect the general public based on that evidence. So I'm grateful to both entities for assisting, certainly Barbados Licensing Authority and certainly the wider government, for allowing us to be able to make that change. Prime Minister did indicate a few weeks ago that before the end of October that we would be in a position to lay this particular amendment in the Parliament of Barbados, and we have so delivered on that promise. That has been outstanding for many years. So I hope that all of the elderly persons who now fall within that category are certainly appreciative of the change, because I know that they had complained about the hassle of having to constantly go back and forth with the Barbados Licensing Authority. And again, while on the one end we want to make sure that the general public is safe, equally, we cannot be inconveniencing people just for the sake of inconveniencing people. And therefore, we must heed and pay attention when concerns certainly are raised in the public domain. Now, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order 2018 Validation Act 2023, I would want to indicate any validation that comes to this chamber, I think the public can appreciate, is usually to correct something that has gone wrong. Or something that was an oversight. So this is no different. I believe back in 2018, when we would have abolished the road tax and replaced it with a fuel tax, Prime Minister Motley would have indicated at the time in that budget, made that pronouncement. The fees at the time for registration on purchase of a new or a second-hand private vehicle was $400. And which still is today, and all persons purchasing commercial vehicles, whether new or secondhand, were to pay a registration fee of $1,000. The commercial vehicles at the time were required to be registered on an annual basis, but were to pay 50% of the previous fees, which would have been paid as road tax. However, the draft order to provide for the imposition of the new and existing fees was prepared, and then it subsequently came into effect. In other words, we made sure that what was pronounced in the budget became the law thereafter. And that came into effect as the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order of 2018. However, the order was made under the authority of the minister then responsible for transport works and maintenance, and that obviously would have been contrary, as we have reviewed now, it would have been contrary to Section 5.2 and 5.3 of the Road Traffic Act, which provides that those fees are actually to be prescribed by the Minister of Finance. As a result, the current bill before the chamber is therefore intended to validate the payment and the collection of fees pursuant to the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order of 2018. And this order provides for the imposition of the new and existing fees paid and collected by the Barbados Licensing Authority pursuant to the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order 2018 during the period from September 15th, 2018 to the date of the commencement of this new act. And this is to be deemed to enable that those persons who would have paid during that period, that all of their payments have been lawfully and validly paid and collected. So, Mr. Speaker, those are the two major amendments to the road traffic amendment, but also addressing the issues of the road traffic registration fees order in terms of bringing us in line with the law. Let me just say that this administration is never afraid to admit where there has been a misstep, but also to correct it and not to allow it to drag on. And I'm grateful that we've been able to make the necessary correction. It was an oversight, I think, in terms of from the ministry at the time, in terms of perhaps being anxious, I suppose, to have the order done immediately after the Prime Minister has made the announcement in the budget. But we have sought to correct that in this particular amendment that is before the House. And again, to reiterate that any changes in terms of any increases of fees or decreases of fees or no fees is still within the remit of the Ministry of Finance and does not fall within the remit of the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources. So, Mr. Speaker, I would want to just conclude by saying that there will be, I think, other opportunities to speak more widely to general issues relating to road traffic. I don't know that today is that day, but I do feel that these two amendments are quite significant and require, I think, for the public to be able to digest that we are actually in the process of making the necessary modernization to the Barbados Licensing Authority that they have been calling for some time, and to enable that this process is allowed to get on its way, because there's still much work to be done, certainly in relation to the approval of the garages over the next few weeks prior to the proclamation of this bill. But at least we have set the train in motion in relation to easing and to modernize the way in which we do business. I know we started off this term being able to improve the issuance of the police certificate of character, Mr. Speaker. We have also been at the forefront of the liquor licenses As one that has run a bar, I can tell you the process back then was extremely complicated and extremely frustrating to be able to have to make different applications and to go through a very long-winded process to be able to run a business. And I'm grateful that this administration, while sometimes it may take a little longer than we would like, the truth is that we are making best efforts to try to simplify processes to make life a little bit easier. People often forget the challenges that we had in getting a police certificate of character. A simple process, but one that, for whatever reason, became extremely tedious for the persons who were trying to get a certificate of character to be able to get a job or just simply to update their records generally. And so, you know, as we move in the direction of the Barbados Trading Card, you know, and we start to upgrade and to use technology in a different way, I know that it is not always a straightforward process. And, you know, at times I too have my own frustrations in relation to how technology sometimes seems not to ease the problem, but sometimes creates another frustration. But I do see some of the benefits that have taken place as a result of us moving in the direction that we're moving. And I think once we're able to work through a lot of the issues from the outset, as opposed to trying to diffuse the issues later, I think that the public can rest assured that this administration certainly is seeking to improve the quality of doing business in Barbados and make it easier for all Barbadians to be able to interface. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I'm obliged.
Honourable member, you have to move that the bill be read a second time.
I'd like to move, Mr. Speaker, that the bill be read a
This order
second.
9. This would be order 9.
Sorry?
Order 9.
Yeah, I beg to be read a second time.
Honourable member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise, of course, to support the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister who just spoke, and to take note of the tremendous work that is being done in that ministry. I want to commend the current minister, the Paralsec, and of course the ministers who preceded them in this ministry. Transportation is obviously not an easy ministry by any stretch of the imagination, but we must acknowledge that a lot of work has been done to advance the government's agenda in relation to modernizing this particular sector, as we've attempted to modernize all of the sectors. And Mr. Speaker, sir, these things are of tremendous material significance. Anything that serves to correct an inconvenience in the lives of people is certainly worthy of praise, and these amendments will make life easier for a lot of people. I have a friend, sir, who is well known to many in this business, who spends a lot of time at the licensing authority. And he used to complain oftentimes. He's a man prone to complain. He's my good friend, a man prone to complain about anything in life. But he spent a lot of time at the licensing authority, sir, and he used to complain about the length of time things took. And he too now is beginning to see improvements. So if you can get this particular man to acknowledge improvements, then we have done a good thing. And I have seen this, sir, and heard this in several corners of Barbados about the things that have been improved. As the Honourable Minister said, we haven't been able to improve all things, but we've surely been able to improve many things. And these things take time and are works in progress and works in process. And so I wish to commend the Minister for the incredible work that is being done there, sir. I've had the opportunity, sir, I don't know if I should call it an opportunity, I have to go and weigh cars at a time when I used to bring my own cars, not to sell, my own cars, and different things. And it used to be, for me, a question of why am I doing this? Because the weight is the only thing. There's never been a case where the two were out of sync. And if I have to do it, because it didn't make sense to me, why can't I do it at a place that is more convenient? You'd have to wait the entire day, sir. And there is a cost of waiting. There is obviously the frustration you endure having to wait for long periods, but there's also a cost, because the time you spend at the licensing authority to do these things, sir, you could be out doing something else. So, there's a cost to doing these things, and there's also an opportunity cost. And I think we've been able to rectify that. I know there are a number of persons in the field who want to see us do more. But I think you have to claim ground, sir, where you can, then move on. And in this regard, I want to thank the licensing authority. I know there is now acting a new chief, and I anticipate under her we'll see tremendous progress on a number of vexing matters, sir. I also want to say, sir, that as the minister responsible for persons who are older, sir, that it is a good thing to see that we have now been able to move from every year to every 2 years, maybe, depending on the person's circumstances, but every 2 years for the general public, for persons who are, I think the law says 70 or 75 years and older, up to 85, sir. I know BARP had been advocating for this for a long time, and it is a pleasure to see it come to pass. And why is that, sir? Because, you know, we think that any person over a certain age has become a burden on this society. And we do not take into consideration that people's capacities have changed. When this legislation came into pass, or came into being originally, the life expectancy in Barbados wasn't even 70. You understand, life expectancy wasn't, for the average Barbadian, for a long time, life expectancy was 68 and 69. And so it was a time when older people perhaps would have lived, you know, barely been able to get 70. The average Barbadian now will live to about 78, 80 years old. And we've seen that change in life expectancy, sir, which means that as a person lives longer, hopefully, because it hasn't necessarily been the case, as people live longer, sir, they are aging better, sir. And that the average person at 70 should have the capacities that they previously would not have had, considering that the life expectancy in Barbados was a lot shorter, sir. But of course, it also tells me that we have to continue to do things for older persons, sir, because as our society gets older, sir, there are things that we have to be mindful of. We want persons to be able to take advantage of what BARP and the government of Barbados have worked, and the transport body, the private sector body, I can't properly remember the name, but they've worked together on to be able to achieve, the government, the transport body, and BART, sir, to be able to achieve. But it means that people have to take care of themselves. I've just heard, sir, at a meeting at PAHO that about 10% of persons in the region, sir, older persons who are suffering with a disability related to their eyes have cataract, sir, and it's cataract that has caused blindness, sir. The average cataract, if you have to pay for it in the private sector, surgery is about $500 if you go early enough. So for $500, people are going blind, sir. And we have to be able to address these things. And I'm just saying, if you're able to take care of our bodies and take care of ourselves and take care of our older persons, then perhaps it would be beneficial, because these persons then can make better use of these things, sir. And all these things are obviously interrelated. I am very happy with a lot of what is happening in terms of the wider modernization of Barbados, sir, because we've benefited from it. You're able to pay a lot of things online that you couldn't traditionally pay, renew your license. You said there's so many things you can do now that you could not have done. And I think Barbadians have forgotten how difficult it was to do a lot of these things, and therefore not able to take full advantage of their own capacity to appreciate the work that is being done in this matter, sir. When I was a younger person, sir, I wrote my dissertation on the elderly in Barbados. I wrote it on self-help organizations as a tool for empowering elderly persons. And at that time, sir, of course, many people were not considering that, you know, Barbados is an aged society. Aging at the time, it's now an aged society. It was an aging society then. Because a decade ago, you know, the average, there were 65 years and older, there was 13% of our population about a decade ago. It is now about 26%. It's literally double. At the rate at which we are going, sir, the average Barbadian will be over 60 by the year 2050, sir. That should be, but it is a very startling thing. And it means that we have to be able to do things differently, sir. That is why these things that we're making convenient for older persons, sir, are so tremendously important. But I wrote my dissertation, sir, on self-help organizations as a tool for empowering older persons. And the fact that BARP, the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, has been able to play such a meaningful role in this regard, in terms of being able to help the government, sir, because that's what it is. Help the government carve policy that speaks to the modern day realities of persons is of tremendous importance, sir. And I know this is something that they've been advocating for a long time, sir, and I think you have to commend the government for listening and implementing policies that reflect the interests of the group, sir, that serve other people. Because that's what it is. You're elected to serve other people. I also feel, sir, that you have to commend the government, sir. It's an amazing thing, you know, because when you put out a policy for comment, you have consultations for a long time. Very few people comment, and very few people form part of the consultation. You carve your policy, sir, with the information that is presented to you by other people, then other persons come forward. At that point, you have two options. You could drive through the policy and say, well, I already gave you the opportunity to comment. Or you, sir, as a mature government, could reflect on that and invite other people to comment, even though you gave them processes of consultation. And that is what we've done. So as it relates to BARP, sir, it is good that the government has listened and has been able to make this amendment, sir, in as much as we are doing the same thing with the Child Protection Bill. That is led now, sir, in select committee being chaired, sir, by the Honourable Member for St. George North. Having gone through a whole process of consultation to come again, sir, and give people another opportunity to comment on the bill, sir. Because that is the reflection of the maturity of those of us who now hold this office, sir. It is not a weakness. And this narrative that because the government has gone back and has allowed other persons to have input into these things, sir, is a narrative being created for political points. But the reality is that you have to be able to give people every opportunity to be able to comment, sir. So I see it as a strength and not as a weakness, sir. I want to thank BARP for their work, sir, and for staying this particular course, sir. In this vein, sir, you also have to give BARP some credence, sir, and some acknowledgement and thanks again for the work in relation to the tap and go. I remember, sir, that there was a belief that you could not use the old ID cards, and at a certain point in time, it was going to be shut off without consultation. And BARP wrote in again, had a meeting with the Deputy Prime Minister and the Prime Minister and others, including myself. And through listening again, we've been able to extend. I think the deadline was supposed to be October 31st, and it was extended to January 31st, sir, to allow persons the comfort. But I should also say at that time, I don't know if the Honourable Minister for St. Michael North will speak in this debate, but I remember at that time, I think there were just over 220,000 persons at that time who collected the new ID cards. And a significant number of those persons were already older persons, sir. And the older persons in Barbados, sir, tend to do what they're supposed to do. And they came forward, sir, and they got the new ID cards, sir. But I recall that BARP had been involved in that, sir, and pushing for their constituents to be able to receive a better deal, sir. And again, a mature government has a responsibility, even though there had been consultation. And even though I'm sure in the minds of some persons, including the public servants, that they had done what they were supposed to do, to take the decision as a government and to say we will give you another extension to be able to get this right. And I think they'd open about all of the terminals, major terminals were open to allow people to come in and pin the ID cards, and the post offices as well, sir. To make it open and give people opportunity, which is the nature of what it is that we're doing. So through this consultation, sir, this consultative process, sir, as it relates to transportation, we are beginning to see tremendous turnaround, sir, and this is important. We've had, as a ministry, a number of consultations, conversations. We've had comprehensive papers written, sir, in relation to transportation as it relates to some of the most vulnerable in Barbados, as it relates to the elderly, as it relates to persons with disabilities, sir. And the things that they are concerned about, sir, are the things that have concerned the government and are the things that are being addressed as we proceed, sir, going forward. But in that document, sir, we wrote a whole lot about transportation. And we wrote a lot about education. And if you look around this ministry, this government, sorry, sir, if you look around this government, a lot of the concerns that were raised in education being addressed, concerns that were raised in health being addressed, concerns that were raised in transportation being addressed. Now, it is impossible. You know what I find almost, sir, if it were not so serious, it would be comical. The person, sir, who occupied the government for 10 years prior to our coming into administration, complaining about every single thing that they left undone. Everything. So now, all of a sudden, everything in transportation is a problem, but they didn't buy a single bus in that period. Complaining, sir, about holes in the road, but they didn't fix any holes in the road, sir. I remember, sir, a certain person said that potholes save lives in this country. And yes, it's nothing but a transitory inconvenience. Sir, have we forgotten? I remember, sir, when we came into office one day, I was driving and I found myself in traffic. And the honourable member who sits next to me in the constituency of St. Peter coming there somewhere near Farley Hill and going around, coming down the road, sir. And I asked myself, well, what could this be? But there were road works being done. This is in the probably 2018, 2019, that stretch that we repaved. And there had been no works, no road. Nobody could remember traffic jams for road works in this country because there hadn't been any. And now all of a sudden, every single road in Barbados is a problem. But the government, sir, is working to repair roads. When they had not repaired any roads, they complained about potholes. They didn't fix the potholes. They complained about buses. Hadn't bought any buses, sir. And I'm not saying that there isn't work to be done. Of course there's work to be done. But what allows you such moral indignation to feel that you could come forward and condemn an entire government for doing the things that you did not do when you had the opportunity to be able to do them, sir? And I'm not blaming any government because people will say, no, you've been in for 5 years. And that is why we are doing what it is that we have to do. But that to say that all of a sudden you would do this and you would do that when you did not do it for 10 years, sir. And then to condemn a whole economic program, a transformative, homegrown economic program, sir, that has given us the flexibility and the wiggle to be able to do these things, sir. Condemn the whole economic program when they did not have enough foreign exchange to buy a mint. And would condemn us now, and we were able to buy buses, buy trucks, fix roads, sir. And at the end of the day, sir, this is what this is about. We came to office to serve our government, sir. These ministers in here, sir, including myself, sir, sometimes I feel that we are working so hard that sometimes we don't respond to the questions that are being raised in the public. You're so busy working. You understand? We're so busy putting in these hours, and I mean hours, sir, you don't respond. But the truth is that our story is not one that we need to go in a corner and assume a fetal position and cry about. Because this government has done too much work in the areas that matter, sir. And I see it certainly in transport. And people complaining about buses and they can't. I don't mean the people, I don't mean the Barbadian citizens who feel that we need to get more. And I know more buses were just bought. I think we bought in, 10? With a view to bringing in more buses, sir. I've seen us, sir, also try to, what the Prime Minister calls, complete the circle of enfranchisement by allowing persons, sir, to own some of the buses, sir, at some point. And to be able to do the same thing for the persons who repair them. So when we talk about transformation, we're talking about putting power back into the hands of the people, well, that is what this government has been busy doing. This government has been busy, sir, delivering, but also allowing people in this sector, sir, to be enfranchised. And I've heard other persons, sir, in the private sector have asked us about being able to have some duty-free access to be able to bring in buses for persons with disabilities, and this is a conversation we are having, sir. We also know that the buses we brought in, sir, accommodate persons with disabilities. We need to have more, sir. We've also, in the ministry, we bought and brought on new vehicles, sir, to be able to move persons with disabilities. And the two things are happening, sir. Yes, the government is responding, but when you start to perform, other people come forward. So the need becomes greater. People are saying things are happening, more people come forward. And as more people come forward, we have to respond further. Because you are hearing people complain now, sir, and ask legitimately, because they should ask, for things that they were not asking before when the other government was in, because they knew that they were talking to people, sir, who were deaf. And at the end of the day, when they spoke, sir, there was nothing happening. But in this government, when people speak, we respond. And so you're seeing that response, sir, in transportation. You're seeing that response too, sir, in the social services sector, sir. I'm very happy with the work that is being done, sir. I want to commend BARP, sir, because I know it is because of the advocacy of the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, sir, that a lot of these things are happening. We have to continue to be able to do more, sir. And we have, sir, to complete our modernization agenda. Change is not easy, sir. If it were a case where, sir, all of the issues were understood properly and there were solutions and resources for all of these issues, sir, we would have what is a technical problem. When you have technical problems, sir, you don't need to learn any new skills. You don't need to get any more know-how. You know the issue. It's as if a man breaks his arm, sir. It's a technical problem in the modern society. You come in, you reset the arm, you put it in a cast, the guy will heal. You have the know-how. Sir, a lot of the challenges that we're facing now are adaptive challenges. These are challenges, sir, where we do not have the know-how. We really do not have the resources. In many cases, we do not have the skill set to be able to address them on our own, sir. But that you have to then learn new skills, and the public also will have to learn new skills. It's a process, sir, of adaptation. And that in this process of adaptation, sir, obviously, sir, because you're learning new things and you're coping with new challenges, sir, it becomes a lot more difficult. Any doctor would tell you that in relation to the surgeries that they perform, you could have a successful surgery and the patient is still dead in a few months. It is not the surgery half the time. It is that process of adaptation, adapting, changing behaviors to be able to benefit from the surgery. You go in and you help a man with a new heart, but he continues to drink. He continues to smoke, continues to stress out himself, refuses to exercise, sir. It is that process of adaptation, and the government, sir, is in the process of adaptation. The country is in a transformative process, sir, a process of adaptation. And why is it that I think we have to go back and spend time in communication? It is not to blow our own horn. It's not to rest on our laurels and say that we've done amazing jobs, sir, and to communicate that to the public. It's to engage in a process of conversation and, at some points in time, confrontation. Because people believe that every single confrontation is unhealthy. Sir, sometimes, sir, the best learning occurs where you and some person are having that dynamic, sir, where it is an uncomfortable conversation. And if we could step back, sir, from our egos sometimes and realize the amount of data that is made available to a person at a time of such conversation and confrontation, then we would all be better off for it, sir. When it comes to transportation in this country, everybody is a professional. It is not like economics where some people think, and even then, everybody is a professional. And certainly, sir, as you know, in the social sector, everybody is a professional. So everybody knows the solution, everybody knows the diagnostic approach that you must take, and everybody knows the way forward, sir. And so you have to engage people, sir, because of their understanding of what these realities are, sir. In transportation, everybody knows, sir. I've had people say to me, if they were responsible for transportation, they would do this and they would do this, sir. But the reality for small island developing states is that you are constantly facing new challenges, sir. So I heard and I saw on social media, sir, some of my colleagues don't read social media. I suppose it is depressing, but I always read what the comments on social media. I like to read them. Not only about my ministry, about other people's ministries. I like to read them about what's going on in the world too. I like to read and to see, okay, this is what people are saying. Sir, there are wars being fought. There are wars being fought. Both of them, in my mind, are just wars. But there are two wars being fought now, sir, as you are well aware, sir. And that the more recent wars, sir, I've seen not only the government, I've seen an independent economist, definitely not associated with the government, say that the cost of that war will be felt in Barbados. And persons commenting to say, oh, here is another government person trying to fool people, sir. But, sir, when I was minister responsible for maritime affairs, sir, when we had those logistic challenges, it became so difficult to get things in Barbados. And then when you could get them, they became so expensive. You know, the cost of moving goods across the world went up. When they had the war, when they had the blockage in the canal, sir, and those prices never really came down. And person, sir, we have said to people that because of these wars, sir, you could expect things are going to go up. The cost of a bus is not going to be the same as the cost of a bus before the wars, sir. The length of time that it would take to get a bus is not the same time that it would take to get a bus now. Everything has changed. And you try to connect the dots for Barbadians, sir, because you want to engage in a conversation with people, sir, that at the end of the day, sir, they understand it. I feel, sir, my role in public life, I've tried very hard, sir, to be honest all the time. Which is not to be, you know, Barbadians like to say, I call a spade when they're being rude to people. I call a spade. And it means that sometimes they're just cursing you, or they're being rude. I'm not talking about calling people a spade. I ain't calling a spade. But I am saying, sir, that we have to engage in honest conversation. Now, I've seen these things, sir. You look at the cost of moving food to Barbados, the length of time that it takes to be able to get things here because of wars, because of the climate crisis, how difficult it is, sir. And you connect these dots, sir, so that Barbadians understand it. A meaningful, progressive, transformative listening government, sir, that is mature, has a responsibility to go to the public and explain these things. When you explain these things to the public, sir, you read the comments. Oh, this is just trickery. You know, the blockage in the Suez Canal had nothing to do with the length of time it took for these things to come to Barbados, sir. But these things do. These things, sir, should concern the average Barbadian, sir, because it means that these costs are going to go up. And the time that it takes, it will be longer. So when we are a mature government having mature conversation, but the opposite of maturity is immaturity. So if you're a mature government having mature conversations, then the other side, sir, who are on the same social platforms and in the press, suggesting that these things are not true, that there is no relationship between what is happening in the international community and the crisis that we are going to face, sir, for political mileage, sir. And misleading the people. But you know you can fool some people sometimes. But you can't fool all the people all of the time. And eventually, sir, those chickens will come home to roost. Because if you want to get into government on a ruse, you want to get in on trickery and some sleight of hand, sir, at some point you're going to have to be able to govern. And I know that at the end of the day, sir, the reality is in this modern Barbados, sir, that there are a number of things that are outside of Barbados, sir, that are affecting Barbados, sir. We are doing our level best to be able to address these things. And perhaps, sir, the fact that we engage in conversations, sir, and try to bring Barbadians along with us, sir, is the way to do it, sir, but it's also caused people to say things, sir. And that is fine. That is why I feel when we engage with a person, sir, and they're having these conversations, we also have to be able to speak back, sir, and to move these things forward. So in the ministry that I hold responsibility for, we have a very good relationship with the Barbados Association of Retired Persons, as we must. We are modernizing that sector, sir, as they are modernizing agriculture, as they are modernizing in transportation, in health, labor, sir. You name it, sir, and we are engaging in change. Perhaps, sir, this government is engaging in changing a number of ministries at the same time. And change is difficult. And when you're changing so many things at the same time, it becomes very difficult to bear. And I appreciate that it's difficult for people to bear. And I also feel, sir, that we have to honor the losses that people think they're incurring when we change the things with which they're familiar. We're changing education. I know, sir, that you say to a person, sir, permit me to say Combamere, and all of a sudden you're changing Combamere, what that meant or means for people, sir, and it's a whole set of feelings. You do the same thing, sir, at 8C, sir, it's a whole set of feelings. I went to the St. Michael School, feelings. People who went to Princess Margaret, St. George, Garrison School, feelings. Because there's no greater love, perhaps, than the love of Jesus and love of parents that Barbadians know than that which they know for their school. But when we change the school, when we change the reform, when we go through this reform process, people have to deal with those losses, the loss of association and familiarity. And we have to honor those losses, sir. because it is difficult for people to receive these things when they're struggling with their own things. I recently had a small trauma, sir, in my own life on a flight. I won't get into the details of it here, sir. But when you go through a traumatic event, sir, it's difficult to tell somebody who's dealing with trauma about something else, because all they're dealing with is their own trauma. And that we have to appreciate that a lot of these changes that we are making, positive for the country, positive for the individual, but traumatic as we execute them. And if we can consider that, sir, perhaps that is why I feel it is best that we continue to engage in debate, back and forth, sir. It is also best for us to be able to spend some time diagnosing the challenges. And then any country in these small island developing states, so the Caribbean region, the honorable member for St. Michael, South Central would tell you, sir, having been a professional, the Caribbean region has an implementation deficit, sir, perhaps beyond any other region. We also have absorptive capacity issues because, you get all this money. You can't spend the money half of the time because these monies sometimes come with conditions and also the rate of implementation. And then we have implementation problems, sir. And I look at what is happening, sir, and I'm asking myself, sir, what should be the response of a government that has been able, sir, to absorb these resources, sir, and in some cases are delivering very effectively, sir. Filling an implementation deficit, sir, that has crippled this country. So when you come in as a new administration, I can speak for my ministries, both of them, the one I held and the one that I now have. So for the last 5 years, public servants would tell you that the rate at which this government moves, sir, is faster than any other government they have seen. And I speak very highly of the public service, sir, because I've been a public servant for most of my professional life. I joined the public service in 1996 in the VAT office, sir. I left it as a director, sir, in 2014 before I joined Global Affairs Canada, sir. I have a lot of respect for public servants. I hear what people say about them, sir. I do not believe it all to be true because there's some very decent, hard-working public servants in this country, sir. But I also know that our systems, sir, are challenging. And I therefore understand why it is that in every single ministry, bar none, every single ministry, there are no changes being made, sir, to modernize a lot of these ministries, sir. Changes being made, sir, to be able to deconstruct, as we say, and reconstruct. Changes being made, sir, to fix these problems, sir, so that we could get rid of that implementation deficit. And the only way we will be able to do that, sir, is to do it. Like Nike. Just do it. And it means, sir, that we have to train up the public servants, sir, in many ways, sir. I keep telling my public servants, go online, find the best practice in the world, and figure out a way how you're either going to go there to see it, learn from it, or bring them here, study it online, or something. Because the new world, sir, demands the best of all of us, sir. And there is no shame in saying that you don't know. There is absolutely no shame. We have been taught, sir, as persons who are in positions of authority, sir.
Your Honourable has 2 more minutes.
What?
What?
Sorry, sir, that was a slip. I had told you, I remember from St. Peter I was going to speak for 15 minutes.
15.
I thought I was doing 10, sir, but your clock is always right, sir.
You saw it was only 10. You have 1 more minute, Honourable.
So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I will wrap up, sir. Thank you for your kindness, sir. I just want to say as I close, sir, that I want to thank the minister and the Deputy Prime Minister and the minister responsible for transportation, sir, for the changes that are being made because these will make it easy for the average person. That's what it's about. It's no fancy thing, sir. Making life easier for the average person. I commend the ministers who went before as well. I also feel, sir, that I have to commend BART for the work that they have done, sir, in order to make sure that they advance the agenda for a vulnerable population that is increasing in this country. I want to thank the public servants in the Ministry of Transport, sir, for being able to recognize that there is a need to do this work, sir. I also hope, sir, that under the new chief, sir, we're able to see much progress as we, sir, push an agenda that is fast-paced, transformative, sir, but one that will uplift the average Barbadian. So with those few words, I thank you, sir.
Honourable for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And like the Honourable Member, I don't intend to delay the House very long with a few words on this matter, which I support fully. But however, I wanted to start where the Honourable Member spoke in his, Honourable Member for St. Michael South spoke in his presentation about, he said two things that jarred my memory before I get into the substance of my presentation. The first thing was everybody is an expert. Everybody is an expert. And that reminded me of something very interesting. And it is that, you know, with the rise of the internet, there's something called Google. And people go and search on their particular condition and they consult what they call Dr. Google. And after working for 30 years as a surgeon, I often used to have to tell people that I am not Dr. Google, and my university was not Google. I went to an appropriate university and had appropriate training, and this is the advice that I can offer to you. And if you would prefer Google do your operation, so be it. But I cannot do what Google is recommending. That's the first thing that I would explain to people. And 95% of the time, they would accept my recommendation. And 5% of the time, they would go and see somebody else and then come back and accept my recommendation. So 100% of the time, because Google cannot do an operation. That's the first thing. The second and more important thing that he also mentioned, and I think which was critical, and again took me to my training in medicine, is he said that a surgeon can do a job and the patient still die. And it brought a bit of a tear to my eye because it reminded me of a procedure. It reminded me of an operation I did when I was at the Royal Gwent Hospital, where a patient had a growing tumor in their face, which we removed, and it took us 11 hours to do the procedure. And after doing the procedure, the patient passed away. 11 hours of removing a tumor, reconstruction, a week of workup for that patient to do that procedure, a week of workup to do that procedure, and to do all the work associated with it, and all the teams associated with doing that, and then the person passed away, not from the procedure, but from liver failure. Liver failure because of other problems that she would have had. So it brought that back forcefully to recognize that, you know, sometimes you try to fix one issue, but another issue can cause a problem and a difficulty with a person. And we have to accept that because everything is connected. And sometimes you have to understand that even although we aspire to greatness, you know, only God has that greatness, and we can only do the best that we can do each time. Mr. Speaker, I also wanted to get into a few things that relate to the particular bill in question. First, the C plates. You would recognize that on the roads of Barbados now, commercial vehicles are carrying C plates. And if nothing else, it brings back the point that it takes very, very long in government to get things done. The C-plate legislation is something that I first brought when I was the Minister of Transport. And it's taken almost 4 years to get from the time we brought the legislation to now actually seeing members with C-plates and vehicles with C-plates. And to be clear, the reason that commercial plates were done is because we have to be able to recognize that there are some people that use their vehicles for commercial uses and not for private. So therefore, their insurance, their registration, and all the necessary things concomitant with having a vehicle on the roads must apply. So this is why C-plates were important, and I'm happy that at long last, we're able to see the implementation of the commercial plates in Barbados, and I salute the Minister and the Ministry for persevering to getting that through and getting the C-plates done and the necessary requirements for it. I also salute the Ministry, and I fully applaud the ability for the driver's licenses and elderly people to be able to go a little longer before they require the medical certificate, and for the driver's license to go for 2 years, as the minister said, in some instances, and 1 year after as you get older. And let's be clear, two things. The life expectancy of the average person born today now is essentially a decade more than it was in the 60s. And it's because of the same advances in medicine, the same advances and improvements in healthcare and our environment and everything is allowing people to live longer and live healthier lives over a longer period of time. So when that legislation first came in, life expectancy was lower, and the opportunities and the environment for people to live healthier lives was lower. So as we as a government and as we as a people are experiencing a higher and better standard of life and better quality of life and better medicine and better health care and a better environment, it stands to reason that people will be able to drive for longer periods of time. In fact, Barbados has the second highest number of centenarians in the world and the highest number of male centenarians in the world. So we know that because our people live longer, you would expect that the opportunities for them to drive longer and at an older and increased age is necessary. So therefore, this legislation is only keeping in step with our life expectancy and with our quality of life and quantity of life. So obviously, this is something important, and I salute for the Barbados Association of Retired Persons to have been recommending it, and the ministry to have taken up that recommendation, and it is fully supported. And what I imagine, actually, that over time, as we continue to live even longer, and I think as people, there is now, in fact, a drug that can reduce and stymie the advance of Alzheimer's as well. And I fully foresee that in the future, that too will become a thing of the past. Just like how polio has become a thing of the past, as medicine improves, that too will become a thing of the past, and we will have medications to treat those people that may be at risk from Alzheimer's. And therefore, then their quality of life and their quality of life improves, and therefore more and more people will be able to operate vehicles safely and competently at an increased age. So this is something that we support, and we look forward to it over time. I have no doubt that that will be changed again and be increased even further. I also want to talk about the concept of the garages and decentralizing. The Barbados Civil Party is the party of decentralization. Let us be clear. Because at the end of the day, you have to meet people and offer people to services where they are. And this is why we had the polyclinics decentralized and polyclinics all over the country, because the Barbados Civil Party is the party of decentralization. You have to take the services to people where they are. So this concept of the garages being able to provide that service is part of that. So that we have more and more garages providing the service so people can access the services in a wider range without having to come to town, for argument's sake. They would have a garage in their area or in their vicinity that they can go to without having everybody come to one location, provide the service efficiently, effectively, and the people can be on their way. So this is an important thing, again, something that I started when I was at the ministry, and it's only now coming to fruition, but I salute it. Because whoever, the point is that it is coming and is being there so that the people can benefit from improved service and improved delivery of service so that they can go about their lives in an efficient and a proper manner. And that is something that's long in coming, and it gives people a better access for better delivery of service. Another issue that I wanted to speak on, Mr. Speaker, has to do with the driver's licenses, not only from the age, but also what I am seeing in other jurisdictions. And I asked the ministry at the time to look at it, but I didn't get the traction that I wanted. And it is this. In Virginia, the state of Virginia in the United States, what they have, and bear with me if I try to explain this, what they have, rather than people having to do a test, they have approved instructors. And the approved instructor has a student that they log the hours that the student does on the road. And then based on the hours that the student does on the road and all of the tests that the instructor carries them through, they can go and access a driver's license without having to do a test. So they have a forward way of thinking. In Barbados, we have instructors, and then the instructors go and you do a test, and then you get your driver's license. But they've taken that to the next stage and said, rather than you having to do a test and having to book an appointment, wait for an appointment, and all of that, the approved instructors are also the testers, the testing officers, for argument's sake. So the approved instructor carries you through for 40 hours, which to me is better. It's like a school-based assessment. Because obviously the person that is with you for 40 hours knows more and can understand more and can assess your ability to drive better than the 30-minute test. So obviously it makes more sense that the person that is the instructor that carries you through the paces, that sees how you operate, that sees that you can handle the highway, that sees that you can appropriately manage around the boat, and see that you can do it consistently over a period of hours, must be a better gauge of your ability to drive than going out for 30 minutes and have all of the nerves and the nerves associated with that, and the difficulty, whether it be a bad day for you, bad day on the roads, traffic on that particular day. It may be better to look at that system. I'm going to suggest to the minister that that's something that they could look at, where they have an approved instructor or series of approved instructors who log the amount of hours that a student does, and based on that student's experience and ability, then that instructor becomes the de facto testing officer that can then recommend the person for a license. It's something that to look at. It will certainly reduce the backlog and be able to, again, have a decentralized approach and be able to provide a service to our people effectively and efficiently. Now, the important one that I also wanted to speak out, Mr. Speaker, is the validation. Now, the validation, Mr. Speaker, you would recognize, came from the 2018 September. Now, I was the minister at that time, so I want to be clear. At that time, it was to be able to replace the fuel tax, which the minister said. And it was thought, because obviously everything that comes to this house goes through this, the CPC and so on and so forth, and has to be approved, and cabinet and so on. Everybody thought and went through that it was the minister responsible by order could sign and have this done. But it's only the subsequent assessment and review that it was found that it was not the minister responsible for transport, who was me at the time, but the Minister of Finance. And you got to remember, under the Act, as you know, when the Minister of Finance in a budget says a matter, it becomes law. But then we have to follow through with the legislation after. And I think it was called the Act, I can't remember the name, but the concept is that once the Minister of Finance says it in a budget, it becomes law, but then you have 3 months in which to make it law. So obviously we had to meet that deadline from the time the budget was done till the time that that time would expire to collect those taxes. So we went through, did the whole process, and did it as though it was an order for the minister to sign. But only subsequently now we found it was not the Minister of Transport, but the Minister of Finance that had to sign. And this is what this validation is to do. And it reminds me, Mr. Speaker, you know that, as I've said in this house multiple times, Parliament is an unusual place. Parliament can make something that is illegal, legal, and something that is legal, illegal. Parliament can go forward in time, and Parliament can go back in time. Parliament can do, a former Prime Minister once told me, Parliament can do almost anything, except make a man a woman or a woman a man. That's a surgeon's responsibility, and I get it. But Parliament can do almost anything, and this is one of those times. This is one of those times when Parliament is going back in time and making what was an attempt to do what was right, but now to correct the fine details of it, just to change the minister that allows it from the Minister of Transport to the Minister of Finance. It is a minor matter, but it is an important matter because Parliament cannot be, the government of Barbados cannot be seen to be doing anything that is illegal or contrary to the law. So therefore, as we have to improve that, and it improves it by way of validation, then that is exactly what we have to do to make the validation correct. And let me be clear. This concept of why we changed it so that we put the fuel tax, the registration as a fuel tax. is because there were thousands of people driving on the roads without registration, though. And let's be clear, we did an assessment. What we did is the ministry had a camera that was photographing licenses over time. There was one in my constituency. There was one at the corner of Garrison in the Honourable of St. Michael South constituency, and there was one on Highway 7 in the constituency of Christchurch West. And they were photographing cars that went by and then checking the car on the road to whether it was registered. And we found that there were thousands of cars that were on the road that had not paid registration. And why? What had happened? Because the average Bajan, they work out, the registration is $500, $600, whatever it is, depending on the vehicle. If I go for 4 years and don't get caught, I save $1,600. If I get caught, the fine gonna be $400. So therefore, I still ahead $1,200. So therefore, I ain't bothering with our registration. This is what we were facing. But then what happens on concomitant with that, if you ain't got no registration, you ain't got no insurance. And then what happens, you go and hurt somebody in the car, and then there's no insurance, and the person then can't get the medical treatment because you didn't have insurance. Or their insurance got to pay you. Their own insurance has to deal with the fix, and your insurance, you don't have the insurance, so therefore you can't help. And it was a real problem for us. So we said, no, we're not going to have this registration part. We're going to get the registration on the fuel tax, but we're going to make that if you don't have insurance, it ain't going to be 1,000 or more. We carried it up to 5,000 was the fine. So that they make sure that you must have insurance on your vehicle. And everybody must understand that if you're going to be using the roads, you must have insurance. And that was the reason, and that was important. Because you know, when you are driving the vehicle, things happen. Things happen. Sometimes the best drivers in the world, things happen. Sometimes it may not be your fault, other people come and hit you, but things happen, and you have to have insurance. And that's why we made it clear that everybody had to have insurance. And that's why we made that legislation. The downside of having the fuel tax on the fuel was people that were the man doing the weed whacker. Unfortunately, he had to pay the fuel tax too because he's using gas. The people that using the boats for fishing, unfortunately, they had to pay the fuel tax too, even though they're not on the road, because they're using gas. So it is not a perfect situation, but it was an improved situation to people not paying registration. So that was no longer a blockage to people paying registration, but what they had to do is go and make sure that they paid their insurance. But of course, what we then backed that up with was what we call the EVR, which is still about to come in, as the minister said, the electronic vehicle registration. And what that essentially will do is as you pass through those gantries and you don't have insurance, because you wouldn't need registration, but you don't have insurance, then you're going to get a ticket. It's clear. Because you cannot be putting other people's lives at risk and be on our roads. No, that's not fair. And I can be frank. And everybody might say, oh, you know, the ministry hard, the government hard. But we have to look at the whole people and the whole population to be able to protect everybody. And that's what EVR is about. And so that we can be sure that everybody using the roads is up to date with all of their registration, all of their insurance and everything. And that's what EVR is about. Again, started with me. And it's something that I still look forward to seeing happening because it's so that everybody is on a level playing field, everybody has an opportunity, and everybody feels safe on the roads. Because the worst thing that could happen is somebody comes and hits your vehicle, damages your vehicle, but more importantly, damages you. Because, you know, you can always get back another vehicle, but you can't get back another hand. You can't get back another eye in that way. Your leg, things like that have to be, that take a lot more. And it is important that everybody understands that there's always that risk that we have to appreciate. And this is why insurance for people and that third-party insurance is so important. So, Mr. Speaker, and of course, the last thing, of course, with the fuel tax is that, you know, sometimes you see that people compare the cost of fuel in Barbados to the cost of fuel in Antigua or the cost of fuel in thing or whatever. But you have to compare apples with apples. And most often people forget that the cost of fuel in Barbados has the same fuel tax included. So if you're going to compare the cost of fuel in Barbados, first take out the fuel tax. And then you will then have an appropriate cost comparison between costing of fuel in various jurisdictions. But most often people forget that the registration is in there. In most jurisdictions, there's a registration separate from the cost of fuel. Not so in Barbados because of the issue that we had, which I think we have fixed. And I think it is a fairer system, and it's a better system, and certainly it's been working well. And of course, there are issues, and we will look to tweak to improve on them. So all in all, Mr. Speaker, I fully support all of these amendments to the Road Traffic Act. I think that it is all forward thinking. It's about decentralizing. It is about making our services more accessible to people. And it is about taking into consideration our aging population and making life a little better for everybody throughout Barbados. And with those few words, I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member Sir Michael North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. And Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my full support to the bill that has been tabled this morning, the Road Traffic Amendment Bill, as tabled by the Minister responsible for Transport Works and Water Resources and our Deputy Prime Minister. And Mr. Speaker, it was not my intention when I came into the House this morning to speak on this particular bill. But as I sat and I listened to the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister with responsibility for transport on just how transformative this piece of legislation is, not only the transportation space, but especially relative to its impact on our senior citizens and the general traveling public, I felt it would be necessary for me to lend my voice not only in support, but also to update and to share information with the people of Barbados on what we're doing as an overall transformation mission. And I say overall transformation mission, Mr. Speaker, because you would have heard and probably become very acquainted, Mr. Speaker, with some of our missions here in Barbados. When we first came into office, Mr. Speaker, we had mission critical. Mission critical would have been those elements that we knew that as an administration we had to face and fix. There were issues that were, I would say, confusing and humbugging Barbados and Barbadians, humbugging us as a people and as a country for way too long. Whether it was sewage running in the streets, whether it was a multiplicity of downgrades, I think 23 successive downgrades, whether it was just the complete collapse of our economy, really. We were heading fast towards the potential devaluation of our dollar. And generally, not only from an economic perspective, Mr. Speaker, but just across our country, there was a malaise, there was a heaviness. And I you know, sometimes I wonder if we need to be transported, not actually, but just in our minds back to what it felt like to be in the 2008 to 2018 period. Mr. Speaker, our country, which had once been described by Kofi Annan, Secretary General, as one that was punching above its weight, a country that was recognized by many world leaders as one of the fastest developing small island developing states at one point in time. A country, Mr. Speaker, that between 1994 in particular through to 2008 saw successive years of growth in our economy. We fell from grace in a significant way, sharply, between 2008. And it's a fact. You know, I'm not being political when I say that. The facts are clear that we fell in many respects between 2008 to 2018. We fell. And it was the mission of this administration upon assuming office in 2018, mission critical, to try to address many of those substantial issues that we face as an economy. The first of which was to rescue our dollar. Because had we not made the types of interventions that we made almost on day one, and as cricketers will say, for those of who are cricketers, from ball one, if we had not made those types of interventions, and yes, they may have seemed to have been drastic interventions. But as I've heard from the time I was a little boy, desperate times call for desperate measures. And we were at that point of crisis, right on the precipice of collapse, Mr. Speaker, and Mission Critical was birthed by this administration as an answer to that precipice, to bring us back, to claw us back from the edge, so that we will not fall over and we will have a failed society and a failed economy. After Mission Critical, Mr. Speaker, we wanted to go towards Mission Transformation, which is where we are today, thankfully. So the intention was to solve those issues, those pressing, those burgeoning issues, those burdensome issues, those issues that were almost threatening our very survival, Mr. Speaker, as an economy. And after we wrestle those to the ground, we stabilize our economy, then we can move towards growth and we could take off. That was the intention. But as we know, as life goes, Mr. Speaker, it is not linear. If only our lives were just one point A to point B and a straight line in between the two, all of us will be most happy. We'll be able to plan without any issues. We'll be able to think through our lives and see exactly how things would play. We'll see how the ball would play. But Mr. Speaker, life doesn't work that way. Life is filled with ups and downs, detours, upsets, curveballs. All sorts of different things come at us. And we had COVID. We had freak storms. We had volcanic ash. Sir, we have had, during 2018 till now, some of the most, across the globe, some of the most critical issues that you can think of that have faced every single government and economy on the face of the earth. So Mission Transformation that was planned had to be put one side for a bit, and we turned our attention to Mission Survival. And Mission Survival was simply that, Mr. Speaker, to help us to get through what was the most difficult and trying times on the face of the earth. So I'm glad, having gone through that, we are now, even with this bill today, demonstrating to the people of Barbados that we are turning our attention fully on Mission Transformation. And it reminded me, even as I sat here, Mr. Speaker, thinking about what I would say to you and the people of Barbados and my colleagues this morning, it reminded me of a saying that I learned in business many, many years ago as a business leader. It's simply put, adapt or die. Adapt or die. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that if I had to research that and find maybe the origin of that small part of speech or saying, it would probably be founded in a quote that is attributed to Charles Darwin. And it is said that Charles Darwin said, "It is not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change." And I'll repeat that, Mr. Speaker, because I think it's important for us to let it season in. It is not the strongest of the species that survives. It's not about strength. Nor the most intelligent that survives. Not about how much brain power you have. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. And Mr. Speaker, change we must. I lead a ministry, Mr. Speaker, that is all about change. So I face on a daily basis the resistance to change. It is almost like there's an allergic reaction when you mention change in our country. When you start to move towards changing systems that people have become accustomed to for many years, systems that in many cases that have served us well, yes. But in these systems that need to change now, if we are going to be able to be effective in our jobs going forward, effective in our delivery of public services and goods going forward, we must change. But change is not easy. But change we must. So Mission Transformation, as we have called it, so rightfully and fittingly, is all about change. And these amendments today are also all about change. So I'm happy to be associated with and be a part of an administration that is constantly changing, constantly adapting, because we recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the times that we're facing as a country are not waiting for Barbados alone. The world is progressing, Mr. Speaker. And if Barbados changes or does not change, it does not affect the pace at which the world is changing. We have to do our part to adapt, to change, to transform our processes and our people so that we can be a part of the change that's taking place within this world. Because if we do not change, if we do not adapt, we are likely to die. So adapt or die, change we must. So I started to think about some of the changes that have already taken place in the transformation, even in the midst of mission critical, even in the midst of mission survival. We have already been embarking on a wide sweeping amount of change across this administration, across this government, across this country. And my honourable friend from St. Michael's South would have mentioned that sometimes the change is so voluminous that people will naturally resist it just because of the sheer volume of change. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, sometimes you can get indigestion if you eat too much. And equally, if you try to change too much all at once, you can get indigestion as well, of a different sort. And if, oh Lord, and my learned doctor and friend just gave us a medical explanation as well. If you do not eat, you will get ear. And ear can stick you and hurt you very badly. So, Mr. Speaker, it's important to eat. It's important to make sure that we're still implementing some level of change. And we must strike that delicate balance between no change, too much change. We must find a way to bring our people to a place of balance where they appreciate the need for change. They can go with us when we introduce these changes, and we can hold their hands throughout the change so that they can be beneficiaries of the changes that we're proposing. It was mentioned, Mr. Speaker, the police certificate of character. Mr. Speaker, a process that in many cases was taking 3 weeks at a minimum for a person to be able to get the delivery of the certificate. But a process that started with you having to leave your house at 4 in the morning in some cases and to go and stand up in a line, draw a number and hope that you would be able to be called that day to start the very process for the police certificate of character. And that process now, Mr. Speaker, as I would have done it myself, you can now apply for the police certificate of character online. And within hours, in my case, they say 24 to 48 hours, but in my case, I received it within 4 hours. My police certificate of character was in my email inbox. A simple process that would have replaced a complex, complicated, and frustrating process because we needed it to change. We needed the improvement for the benefit of our people, not only to add to their convenience, but, sir, the productivity that would abound, the increase and enhanced productivity, or conversely, the impact on productivity by people having to wait entire days just to get a police certificate of character or to apply for a police certificate of character. Many people lost job opportunities, Mr. Speaker, because police certificate of character was not coming in a timely manner. These are things that this government has changed, transformed. We have already begun the adaptation process. Liquor licenses, again, another very frustrating process for those who would conduct these types of businesses, bar owners, restaurant owners, etc., even down to those who are applying for licenses during the crop over festivities. All of these were processes that were very difficult to navigate in some cases, time-consuming at the very least. That too is now fully online. And Miss working through the Ministry of Business would have created a portal that would have allowed for these individuals who are partaking in these types of businesses to be able to apply for the liquor licenses online. Another one that doesn't get a lot of mention, Mr. Speaker, but it serves us well as a people all across this country on a daily basis, our Easy Pay Plus platform. It is the payment platform right now of government. It allows for persons, even through the same police certificate of character, even through the same liquor licenses, and many other services that are available online in the government of Barbados. The Easy Pay platform allows for people to be able to transfer their money from them to the government of Barbados to acquire those services. And this platform is constantly being updated, it's constantly being renewed, it's constantly being enhanced to provide even better and more services to the people of Barbados. So we're pleased, Mr. Speaker, that we have adapted, that we've introduced these technologies that can allow our people to be afforded better and more convenient service. You can renew your driver's license online. You don't have to go into the licensing authority necessarily if you don't want to. You can renew it online and save you the hassle, save you the trip, save you the inconvenience. And Mr. Speaker, as I hear the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister speaking on the overall modernization that's taking place, not only in terms of changing the amount of times or frequency within which our senior citizens have to come back to get their licenses renewed, that is a plus, that is a benefit. But the overall modernization, whether it be through the EVR system. But as we look at the entire systems of licensing authority, I'm looking forward to the day, Mr. Speaker, where we don't pass the pine and see people lines wrapped around. I remember those days, especially during COVID, because of the social distancing and all the other parameters that had to be put in place. But many days, whether the sun was shining or the rain was falling, people had to be wrapped around the building on the outside. I look forward to the days, Mr. Speaker, where this becomes a thing of the past across all government offices, not just in terms of the Ministry of Barbados Licensing Authority, but all across Barbados. For those of us who have traveled, Mr. Speaker, the online immigration form, being able to fill that out even before you take the flight, this is something that I have found very convenient, even as I travel on behalf of the government of Barbados. I've been able to go online in my hotel before I leave, before I check out, and I can do my online immigration form. I have all of that done. I have it sent off. I have it approved even before I land. And when I get into Barbados, Mr. Speaker, it is a smooth passage through immigration because I've already done all of the necessary work. That is an improvement. That is an enhancement. That makes life easier for our visitors, for our people, for those who want to invest in our country. All of these things add together to improve the ease of doing business and to make Barbados a very hospitable place for investment, for pleasure, for our people. So, Mr. Speaker, we're not just doing these things because we can do them, but we're doing them to make a better life for our people. That's the bottom line of it all. We're not doing this summer dance in Parliament, and as ministers, we're not doing the work that we're doing, putting in the hours, the 14-hour days and 16-hour days, putting it in for our own health. Certainly not. Certainly not for our own health. But we're doing it, Mr. Speaker, because we want to see our country move forward. We want to see our country not only survive, but also thrive, especially in a rapidly changing global village that we are now very much a part of. Not only the electronic online form for immigration, but the kiosk. That's a piece of technology that was introduced as well. That also when you're coming through the airport, you see our people going, you see visitors going to those kiosks, and they're getting through and facilitated very quickly. Mr. Speaker, generally, across the board, there are already many public services, government services that can be found online, that can either be started online, even if they have to be finished in person. That is something that we're working on. But there are many other government services that can be acquired completely online. And we are pleased with the progress that's been made in that regard. Speaking on behalf of what's happening internally across the public sector, Mr. Speaker, many of our public servants now benefit from being able to use a lot of the online forms. Simple things, routine and mundane things like vacation requests and leave request forms. These are things right now that can be found online. And the idea of paper having to go from messenger to messenger, ministry to ministry, from one part of the ministry to the next part of the ministry, a lot of the paperwork that happens within ministries now, paperwork in inverted commas, is being done electronically. That speeds up processes. That allows there to be a paper trail that is easy to find and retrieve in the event of something have to be questioned or in the event of an audit having to be carried out. So a lot of that is already taken place. But Mr. Speaker, I think one that thrills me significantly, and one that we don't mention a lot, is the transformation that has taken place at the level of cabinet. Mr. Speaker, I have heard the stories, and I can just imagine it in my mind's eye. And our honourable member from St. Thomas would recall, our honourable member for Christchurch West would recall. Those are the two I see, Mr. Speaker, that would have been in cabinets before. where there were mountains of paper, files, every cabinet paper that had to come was a file. And I can imagine, given the workload that is in cabinet and the agenda of cabinet nowadays, where we sometimes have, I don't even know, dozens of cabinet papers to review. I cannot begin to imagine, Mr. Speaker, the amount of paper that each and every single member of cabinet would have sitting in front of them to conduct a simple cabinet meeting. I cannot imagine. But look, what do we have today, Mr. Speaker? Every single minister of cabinet has a tablet that has been provided to him or her. And on that tablet, all of our cabinet papers, those papers that sometimes could be 100 pages plus in volume. One paper, 100 pages plus, sometimes 300 pages, depending on the report that's attached. All of those things now are electronically. That in itself is a massive transformation of how we do processes. And it began even at the level of cabinet, Mr. Speaker. So there's a tremendous amount of transformation that is taking place within our country at all levels across the board. But we're not stopping there, Mr. Speaker. As I said, we are now knee-deep into mission transformation. And we're doing all that we can to keep on moving the wheels of government forward to progress our country so that we are not left behind, so that we adapt, so that we do not die. So there's a lot of modernization that's taking place. My ministry, MIST, the Ministry of Industry, Innovation, Science and Technology, has been tasked with the responsibility, Mr. Speaker, of developing and delivering our public sector modernization program, PSMP. The PSMP, Mr. Speaker, is a program and initiative that has been conceptualized to do exactly what it says, to modernize the public sector of Barbados. It has two main components. The first of which is to look at the systems of government, to digitize and digitalize the systems of government, digitize our records, digitalize our services, to make us more efficient, to make our customer service, our citizen service, to improve that, to improve and enhance the ease of doing business. All of this and all of these are the objectives of the PSMP component 1. But the second component is very important as well. We need to modernize our people. Mr. Speaker, I have learned over many years, and it has been reinforced even as I've taken up this responsibility, that technology is not the end-all and be-all. You can have the best technology, Mr. Speaker. You can have the best systems and even the best strategies. And going back to my time in business, there was a saying that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So you can have the best thought-out strategies. You can have the best technologies that you invest in. But if you don't work on your people, if you don't work on your culture, you're going to find that many of those transformations or proposed transformations will either fall flat on their face or they will not yield the results that you intend to see. So component 2 of the PSMP, the Public Sector Modernization Program, is squarely focused on getting our people in the public service up to the level where they can make the best use of the technologies and the transformation that we're trying to bring to our public service. So there's a heavy emphasis on training and retraining, retooling and reskilling, capacity building, skills gap analyses, business process reengineering, mapping exercises. All of this is taking place under component 2 of the Public Sector Modernization Program. It is already happening as we speak. And many people may be wondering, so why haven't they heard about it? What's going on? Why haven't seen? But it's happening behind the scenes. Because when you're re-engineering a whole process, you don't just go break the existing process and start the new one. You go through a process of analysis. You break it down on paper. You work it out on paper. You work it out through consultation and deep and extensive and comprehensive consultation. So that every person who's a part of that new process understands it fully, embraces it fully, and that they can make the most out of their contribution to that process. So the PSMP is one of the landmark activities relative to this transformation, mission transformation that we're on. We're transforming our public service first, Mr. Speaker, and we believe that that transformation in the public sector will cascade and it will drive the transformation in the private sector. Many of my private sector colleagues and partners, they're just waiting for certain things to get going in the public sphere. They're waiting for things to get put in place in the public sphere so that they can then take advantage of, plug into, build on top of the platforms of government. So as we do this modernization in the Barbados Licensing Authority, in the education ministry, in agriculture, in sports, as we do this modernization across the social services. All of this will help to lift our country overall. Mr. Speaker, I want to turn my attention to one of the foundational elements of this modernization, the digital ID. And Mr. Speaker, I want to make it very, very clear as I speak today. The Trident ID that we have rolled out recently is phase 1 of this overall modernization effort. Phase 1. The replacement of the old ID with a new, better, more secure, and smart enabled ID is phase 1 of the rollout of this initiative. Phase 2, Mr. Speaker, is when we will then introduce a digital ID. We have not introduced a digital ID in Barbados yet. I continue to hear people talking about the forcing us to get digital ID. We're not forcing anyone to get any digital ID, Mr. Speaker. I said that a number of times. I will say it again. There's no digital ID in Barbados as we speak. There is a physical replacement to your physical ID card known as a Trident ID card, a better ID card. A much better, a safer ID card, a more secure ID card. We thought it necessary to go that route, and we have done it. And as was said earlier today, over 230,000 people have already applied for. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Barbados are demonstrating that they are confident in this platform, the Trident ID. But the digital ID that we are going to move to in phase 2, that we're working behind the scenes to build and to test and to make sure that when we introduce it to the people of Barbados, when we present it to the people of Barbados, that they are fully on board with it, that digital ID will serve as almost the cornerstone, the foundational block for all of the other digital services that our government will roll out in the very near future. Mr. Speaker, when you walk into a bank today to open a bank account, they ask you for 2 forms of ID. They do this because as a part of their know your customer responsibilities and even their regulations, they have a responsibility to know who they're dealing with. So they must know that Davison Ishmael is Davison Ishmael. And the only way they can know that is if that person presents the 2 forms of ID that have been issued by the government. There must be a time in all Barbados where you will not have to physically present an ID card, but you will be able to do so remotely from a distance, wherever you are in the world, and still have the validity and the authenticity as if it was a physical ID card being presented, one that somebody can touch and feel, and they can look at it and see the different security watermarks and features. You must be able to do that digitally with the same level of security and confidence. So the digital ID will enable our services to be authenticated, or the ID that will be used to access those services would allow us to be able to, with a high degree of assurance, to know that this is Mr. Speaker of the House. So that's what the digital ID is for. It's absolutely critical for what we're going to be doing. If I want to be able to access services as a welfare recipient, Mr. Speaker, I want to be able to access services as a guest or a person attending at the QEH hospital. Or if I want to be able to do anything in education, maybe apply for my child to enter a new secondary school or a new primary school, not secondary school, I must be able to authenticate who I am and prove my identity, and do so in a remote way. And that is where the next phase, our digital ID, is going to take us. But beyond that, Mr. Speaker, we are already well in our way relative to some of the advancements that we're taking to transform our society, to transform our public service. We are at the stage now of building out an implementation roadmap for our national cybersecurity strategy. And cybersecurity is one of these buzzwords, Mr. Speaker. A lot of people have been asking about it. What are we doing in cybersecurity? A lot has been done in cybersecurity. A lot continues to be done in cybersecurity. And it's not every single thing that you can say, because obviously it is cyber security. But even the implementation of our national cybersecurity strategy, the roadmap that is being developed, will mark off key points and components and elements and objectives that have to be reached for us to be able to be sure and safe and secure in our cybersecurity posture here as the government of Barbados. We're also in the process of developing our government digital strategy. So beyond the cybersecurity strategy, which covers that particular area, We have an overarching digital strategy for our government. In other words, how will our government be able to act, behave, respond, use technology, use the digital platforms that are available across the world? How are we going to best use those so that we can facilitate not only our people in the public service, but obviously our people of Barbados generally? So that is the government digital strategy. That in itself is also under development, well in advance in its development. And we're at the stage right now where we're also doing the implementation and roadmap for that for further presentation and for decisions to be made thereon. We're also building up, Mr. Speaker, our e-services platform. E-services, once again, now will tie in to what is happening at licensing authority. So that when a person, a citizen of Barbados, goes to register their vehicle, that the systems at the licensing authority can speak to the systems at the Barbados Revenue Authority. And the systems at the Barbados Revenue Authority can speak to the systems at customs and immigration. It can speak to maybe if there's a role that needs to be played in some other licensing entity across the government of Barbados, that all of that can speak to one another, that these platforms of government will be able to interact with one another, thereby increasing the efficiency of the public servant and at the same time reducing the inconvenience to the citizen who would have to, at this point in time, move from one place to the other, to the other, to the other, sometimes duplicating and triplicating the same documents, same information, going from one government entity to another government entity, but it's only one government, Mr. Speaker. So if it's one government, why do people have to present 3 and 4 times the same information on themselves, citizen of Barbados? So we're building out our e-services platform, and that is also at a well-advanced stage of development as well. So you'll hear more about that in the coming months, Mr. Speaker. As we roll that out, that will give the people of Barbados, the public servants of Barbados, the opportunity to be able to access information, data, that will help them to be able to make the decisions faster and better.
The honourable member has 2 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let me wrap up, Mr. Speaker. Just to conclude by saying, I am fully in support of not only the bill that is before the House today, because of the nature of transformation that is strongly present within it, but I am even beyond that. I am fully supportive of this administration and its continued efforts in under mission transformation and Mission Barbados now, more fully, to bring our country up to the standard that it needs to be at, so that our people, our citizens, our investors, our visitors, the region by extension, can be lifted up and that we can survive and we thrive. Mr. Speaker, there's so many businesses that will depend on a digital platform. There are entrepreneurs that are not yet entrepreneurs, but when we create the digital platforms for them, they will become digital entrepreneurs. There are people in Barbados, Mr. Speaker, who already are performing services for people as far out as China, Asia, all parts of Asia, Europe, all across the world, and they're sitting in their homes right here in Barbados because of the digital platforms, the technological platforms that we are creating and facilitating for them. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this bill wholeheartedly. I want to applaud and commend the Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, for bringing this bill. And I know there's a suite of other pieces of legislation and changes and amendments that are coming to a whole host of other things, not only in that ministry, but across all of the ministries and portfolios of government as we continue to embark on mission transformation. Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged.
Honourable member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to lend my voice in support of this bill that, amongst other things, addresses the modernization of the BLA, this decentralization of services at that institution, as well as addressing what one may describe as a discriminatory practice in basing a person's ability to drive more on age rather than the person's individual health profile. But I want to start, Mr. Speaker, by looking at the modernization of the BLA. Mr. Speaker, when COVID struck this country, struck the world, I was within the Ministry of Education, working with teachers, working with the schools, working with children. And one of the things that I saw, and it was mentioned here this morning on more one occasion, was how quickly the education sector was forced to adapt to changes, to employ, and in some cases deploy new technology in order to continue doing the work that they were mandated to do. We saw the introduction of all types of learning apparatus, all kinds of new methods of instructing children. We saw a digitized approach to teaching. We saw the use of technology like Zoom and Teams used in a way that it was never used before. I mean, in education, we were pretty much on the ball because we were using Zoom for the purpose of online meetings for probably a year before the advent of COVID. But for many, right across the education sector, it was relatively new, the usage of this technology or remote technology to carry out their business. Now, today, even as COVID fades in the review mirror of history, one can still see a number of benefits that came as a direct result of the things that COVID flagged up. I mean, by benefits, I mean a new appreciation for technology, a new appreciation for modernizing certain systems so that they work more efficiently, and in some cases are more effective. And though one might not associate it, even within NTW, in our road construction, we can see evidence of the embracing of technology. And I think of our road rehabilitation program, Scotland Road Rehabilitation Program, where we are building a number of roads within the Scotland district, right across St. Joseph, St. Andrew, St. Thomas, parts of St. Peter, even as far as St. Lucie, because the Scotland district brushes, really brushes, but brushes nevertheless the parish of St. Lucie. And we are seeing the deployment of technology in our approach to road construction. We have to, because we are not only working against the clock, even as we struggle to put measures in place to address our deteriorating infrastructure in road spaces, we are working against the clock. But we are also working in an environment where climate change is a reality. We have a situation where we have a conspiracy of events happening all at the same time that are resulting, these events are resulting in the rapid deterioration, rapid destruction of our roads, our bridges. Even in some cases, we're seeing some of our houses being impacted by these events. So you have climate change. You have a situation where we are seeing more and more vehicles on our roads, heavier vehicles on our roads. We have a situation where we are seeing increase in rainfall. And then we have the fact that our roads in the Scotland district are built on mud. I said this before, whereas in Barbados, a lot of roads are built on limestone and it's easy to build a road. In the Scotland district, in many cases, there's no limestone. There's no kind of stone. You will look if you find some river stone, but there's no stone. There's rock, there's mud, and hard mud and clay. And that's what we are forced to build on. That's what we were building on for years. But with this climate change and the intensity of rainfall, we're seeing that those roads that were built on less than ideal subgrade and subbase as a result of the limestone we use are now deteriorating at a very fast rate. You see, our heavy buses are impacting our roads, our 40-ton trucks are impacting our roads. So we have that as an element that we are fighting against, and we have time. So climate change and time are all combining to make it difficult. So we have no choice, but also look at the adaptation of new technologies in the construction of our roads. So we cannot wait, as in the past, to use traditional techniques and strategies. For example, in the past, we would have built a bridge, and we would have built that bridge and cast it in situ right there on the location, where we would just dig the foundation and cast the bridge there. But within this environment where a rainy season may last throughout the year, we have a dry season, we have a wet dry season, where there's rain all through the year. Or we may have a downpour that may come and destroy all the farm work that was put in place to support the foundation and support the bridge. So these are things that we have now to tackle when we are doing our construction in the road spaces. So we have no choice but to employ technology. And now I'm seeing, I did not know about this, but I'm not a technical person who's not involved in construction at that level, but now you can even have the footing or the foundations of the bridges and the culverts precast and brought and installed and dropped in place, so as to avoid having to go through the process of running the risk of losing that material and that initial work to any flooding or any storm or anything like that. So the construction of precast culverts, even though it's not new technology in the private sector, is relatively new technology for us within NTW, to the extent that we have always used traditional methods, but we have seen the importance of even modernizing that sector. May not be technologically modernizing it, but even though it took technology, digital technology, because anything new is referred to as technology, but digital technology was used in the design of these culverts, and we're going to see in short time, hopefully very short time, as we transition into 2024 and we're back into the dry season, we see the full rollout of some of this technology. And that's just for the smaller culverts right across the Scotland district. But even for some of our larger bridges, we've also had to look beyond what we are accustomed to in terms of developing new technologies to build bridges. Now we are seeing situations where persons are creating bridges, are building bridges that can be installed, fully installed in 7 days, so 10 days. Where in the past it would have taken us months and months and months. We would have started a bridge in December, and we would be struggling to get that bridge up and running by the next rainy season. Down in June, July, we're still struggling to get that bridge. Now we can have, as long as the abutment walls are in place, we can see the rollout of bridges in short time, based on the word of the vendor, of course, is yet to be seen. But I'm pretty confident and comfortable that that kind of technology is there, because the evidence suggests right across the Caribbean that such technology is used in the building out of bridges and culverts and so on and so forth. So we have already seen right across the ministry the adaptation of new technologies. And these are things that maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, we were not even discussing in a serious way. But today, we are seeing the importance of it as we do more and more research. That's why it's always important that we expose our officers to training. Oftentimes, we know we send them off on conferences, and we're not sure exactly what they are exposed to when they go there. But having been to one or two myself, I see that the technology that exists in the world in terms of binding agents and polymers and all such like to make the construction of roads, construction of bridges, construction of retaining structures a lot easier is improving at such a rapid rate that I have no doubt that Barbados and the Caribbean as a whole was in short time be benefiting from all these advancements in construction and construction technology. Even if I could use the example of the Melvin Hill Bridge in St. Joseph that recently failed. In the past, we would have been forced to go in with an excavator, maybe excavate the land right adjacent to the bridge, compromise the property that's there, or have to move the person from there and have them relocated somewhere else. That was perhaps the one option, or maybe one of two good options that we have had. But now with the advent of this technology, where we're seeing a Lego block type technology, where you can just come and install these blocks already precast, and you can build a retaining structure from those Lego type blocks. I've seen them being used in the private sector, and we are also looking at using those in some of our projects to make that work cleaner and faster, and avoid, if possible, having to disrupt any of the houses or the residents within the facility, so within the vicinity of the bridge. So those are some of the things that we are employing to ensure that our processes are much more efficient. Our construction is far more efficient. And I use those as just two examples to give us a sense of where technology and modernization comes in, because right across the board, we are modernizing systems. We are modernizing before our cashless system is coming. Those things are coming in short time. I dream of the day when we can go into, we're not even going. We don't have to go in. And the Honourable Member for St. Michael North has alluded to the fact that we are creating these portals so that we can easily do some of our business transactions online. Just last night, I paid my car insurance. It was due the end of the month, but I wanted to pay early, and I used the online portal that I was instructed to use. I was not familiar with it. I've never used it before. In the past, I would have gone into the insurance company. I would have sat and waited until my number was called, and then I went and I spoke to an agent. And between myself and the agent, we would negotiate how I would pay my insurance, if I would pay in 3 installments, 6 installments, or 9 installments. That was always a discussion between myself and the agent there at the time. But last night, I went online, I saw I went into my account, saw my vehicle there, and just by the click of my mouse, I could go in and I can choose right there. Without having to go through the indignity of explaining to the agent, I can't afford to pay $300 a month, or I can't afford to pay $600 a month. I just can click right there myself and determine if I'm going to pay this off in 3 months, in 6 months, or in 9 months. And I also see how much in terms of interest I will have to pay if I go the longest period. And it wasn't much, and I went ahead and I did that. But I was amazed to see how quickly, how efficient that system was in terms of how I was able to do it in less than 5 minutes. In fact, I insured 2 vehicles, but I wasn't sure what I would see. So I did one at a time. And after I did the first one, I just went very quickly. I did the second one because it was just so easy and so convenient. And I dream, and I'm sure that the Honourable Member dreams with me that someday all of our government departments, the transaction will be just as quick, just as efficient. And we are moving towards that. I have no doubt that the member for St. Michael North is putting in all the hard work to see that this is done in the quickest possible time. Now, just to move on quickly, I said I want to look at three areas, and this has been discussed here: the decentralization of services, the approval of 5, for now, garages in terms of persons being able to now go elsewhere and having the convenience of choosing where to have their vehicles inspected. You know, the BLA is one of those places where, and like other departments in government and in private, you have only one place that you can go. In schools, you can choose to go to private, you can go public school, you can choose to homeschool your child. In health, you can do the same thing. You can go to the hospital, you can go to your private doctor, you can fly overseas and have your treatment. But here, with the BLA, if you want to register your vehicle, you have to go through the Barbados Licensing Authority. So it touches all drivers within this country. All drivers in Barbados have to go through this at some point. Whether you're busy or you have all the time in the world, you have to go through that process. That process oftentimes was a bit longer than most of us would appreciate. I've been there on occasion, and I've seen, certainly in Bra, persons sitting there in long lines that stretch all the way outside, looking miserable, very unhappy. In some cases, if they recognize me, voicing their concerns as to how long the system is taking. So the fact that we can now, in the case of the weighing or the examination of the cars, the inspection of the cars, we can now do that. We can decentralize that and have persons have their choice. They can go, they can make the appointment, what have you. I imagine they will have appointment systems that would perhaps stick close to the time and if they had done it at the BLA, they have that luxury and that convenience. And I'm sure that will all go well for all persons within driving public who have to go through the process from time to time. So that is something that I'm very happy about and glad to see that has taken shape. Just to touch quickly on the EVR, because I would have spoken about it in other places where we're seeing now the technology even expanding beyond the BLA to assist even the police service. And the Honourable Member for St. Joseph has spoken in the past about police having to respond to every single accident, police having to respond to fender benders, to police having to be deployed on the streets at night. I came down from road tennis on Sunday, road tennis finals. Wonderful experience, great time, and I was impressed to see the level that road tennis in this country has gotten to under the leadership of the Honourable Member for St. John. I was coming home at, it was around 12:30 or so, and I saw police on the highway, you know how you refer it as a speed trap? There were police on the highway stopping persons for speeding at 12:30. I know a lot of people speed on the highway in those wee hours of the morning, 12:30, 1:30, 2:30. That's a very common practice for various reasons. Persons would rather be home at that hour than be on any road at any late hour of the night. So I know that's something that they have their reasons. But with the EVR system that is coming in place now, we will not have, of course, there will still be scope for police to do their work in terms of ensuring that persons don't speed on the highway, but the technology will be there in terms of the cameras when we fully roll that out, that we will be able to, check for persons' registration to ensure that we no longer have 30,000. At some point we had 30,000 unregistered vehicles on the road. I don't believe it's that high now, but at some point we were trending in that direction with that number. So we will see a reduction in that. And we also see a reduction in persons speeding because this technology would be able to capture those persons who are speeding. You would see this technology being used right across Barbados. There are a number of locations that we have strategically identified to ensure that we capture most persons. I know there's some areas that you can use back roads and so on and so forth to escape the technology, but persons in Barbados, when they buy a car, they don't buy a car to drive all around the back and through a gully to get to where they want to go. They buy a car to get to someplace as quickly as possible and as conveniently as possible. So they're going to take the highways. They're going to take those major highways, Highway 2A, Highway 1A, Highway 7, and those are the highways where the gantries, as we call them, and the cameras, the EVR system is located, so to ensure that we capture 90% of persons traveling on the roads. And the other percentage of persons who choose to want to drive through the gully, doesn't matter for them, but most persons will be able to. Even in Barbershop, I was having a conversation with a man who was struck by a truck, only to discover that the gentleman had no form of insurance. So we need to eradicate these things from our roads, and if we're going to have to use the technology, because the manpower alone will not do it, we're going to use the technology. So it's just a step in the right direction. I don't want to go into any greater detail because I'm very conscious of what obtains later for this afternoon. But just to say that I see, even in the short time that I was there at the Barbados Licensing Authority and the ministry as a whole, moving in a direction where we are not only adapting to technology, but we are fully embracing new technologies. And there will be other technologies that I will give the Honourable Member for St. Michael South East the opportunity to bring to this Honourable Chamber and speak to you in more detail about. But I can tell you, what we are seeing here is just the tip of the iceberg for what we have planned for the Barbados Licensing Authority and NTW as a whole. Just quickly as I close, I just want to speak to the move to shift the requirements of persons age 70 from having to renew their license on a yearly basis, and also having to have a medical check before doing so. I think in other jurisdictions, this is a matter that's being discussed at different levels. In Europe, they were even discussing at which age persons should be barred from driving altogether. But just like here, it was argued that there's no basis for depriving a person of their driver's license because of the age. There are persons who are elderly, who are 70 plus years, and those persons are fitter than me or many of us in here, even at that age. I go hiking sometimes with a gentleman. He's not quite 70, but he's very close to 70. And if I'm not careful, I can't even keep up with him. So it tells me that a person that is 70, it depends, age is a number, yes, but it depends on a person's individual fitness and ability to function. And that should also be a factor, and not just the fact that the person is 70 or 71. There are people who are 70 and 75 years old who can see better than I can. Some who can walk faster than I can, have more endurance than I do. So I know that alone cannot be a basis. So it's good that we at least revisit that, because when they go on the highway, I don't see elderly persons engaging in the types of activities that you see 25-year-olds and 18-year-olds engaging. That makes the driving environment more unsafe, make our roads more unsafe. Or some of the activities that I see some of our PVS drivers engaging in, that also make the roads and driving on the road unsafe. So it just wasn't as fair as it should be, and I'm glad that we at least give them some wiggle room in terms of their ability to renew their license. I was tempted to share a story. As when I first got my car some years ago, my first car that I bought for myself, I bought it with a big muffler. That time, big mufflers was a thing, and persons would often be driving and keeping a lot of noise on the road. And I remember I came up with the lights by Hines Hill. And while at the lights, a guy came and pulled up next to me. I look at him, he looked at me, he gave me a nod, like to ask me what it is that, you want to see what you got in. I had the urge at that young age to the urge was there, right? But obviously, knowing that it was my first car, and I was pretty greened in terms of driving, and certainly not driving, I wasn't able to drive at any fast speed. I decided, you know what, let it go alone. But, many other young persons may not be mature to that level to just let it pass. They want to test it. So, and that's why we see a lot of accidents on our roads. So to say that, that if we can allow young people to drive without, having to do any checks, we already know in some jurisdictions, if you're too young, even though you have a driver's license, you still have to be accompanied by an adult or a parent. But we don't do that here, because we didn't see the need for it. And the same, we don't see need for a person 70 or 75 years old to have to go and get a medical check every single year. So these are just some of the things that I think that there's major things that I think major wins in terms of this particular piece of legislation. So I want to, as I close, again, throw my full support behind this bill. I know it is the result of a very hard-working minister and a very hard-working team at the BLA. We have seen improvements at an extremely rapid pace within the last couple of months. Certainly, we have seen an uptick in movement for a number of things that were in trend, but were not moving at the rate that we would have liked. But with the new team that has come on board, we have really seen a vast improvement in the turnout of these services. And with that, I want to once again support this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Mr. Michael Sophis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to take the opportunity as I wrap up to thank all honourable members who have spoken in this debate. Honourable Member for St. Michael's South, appreciate the fact that he took us on a journey as to how we got here in relation to the efforts made by the Barbados Association of Retired Persons and their level of advocacy, their continued advocacy in the consultations to allow us to make the changes that were necessary to increase the age at which a medical certificate is required to be renewed for a driver's license. I also want to thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, who put in perspective, certainly from his being a former minister in the Ministry of Transport Works and Water Resources, a lot of the dynamic way in which the ministry operates, but also a lot of the work that has already been started by both himself and other ministers as well who would have preceded me. I think that as the Honourable Member for St. Andrew has just rightly said before taking his seat, there have been a lot of things in motion. One of the things that we realize constantly is across government is that, we often make the pronouncements, but then somebody has to execute. And you always have to make sure that when you raise the expectations about transformation, that equally you have the adequate resources, human resource capacity, as well as the technical resources to be able to execute. Otherwise, you are going to raise the expectations of the general public that you can deliver on all of these great things. But in truth and in fact, it's the same people oftentimes being asked to do the same thing repeatedly, and oftentimes they do not get everything that they are supposed to get done. I also want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Michael North, who I think delivered a wide-ranging and in-depth look at what is happening across government in terms of the modernization of government's program. As I sat there, I reflected on the fact that sometimes, we don't even realize as we're doing things the impact that we're making, because we often look at what is happening now, all the things that are broken. But we have started a lot of things since 2018 that had been left to languish for some time, that we made commitments to the public of Barbados that we would transform. Now, transformation doesn't happen overnight, regrettably, and therefore it does take time for us to be able to make the changes. I think that sometimes the public has this love-hate relationship with change. They love the changes, but they also hate change to also come. And a lot of times we want things to remain the same, but we also want them to get better. And our reality is that things will not get better unless we make some of these changes. When you think of from the things like the 11 plus or opening up the polyclinics, again, people are often resistant when we start to make decisions that go against the grain, but we are trying to, or we have recognized rather, that a lot of the systems that may have worked for us and a lot of the processes that may have worked for us before are certainly not going to help to drive whether it's economic activity or to help us to build out our society in the way that we would like. So I thank him for that. I look forward to the digitization taking place and the modernization within the Barbados Licensing Authority. As I said earlier, we have a lot of files in a lot of offices that have been sat there for many, many, many years, a lot of books in cupboards, creating lots of issues. I remember in the early stages, myself and the Honourable Member for St. Andrew, in doing our walk around the ministry, recognized that, almost a number of the offices and the kiosks that were on the property just had a lot of boxes with old files in them. So we welcome the modernization to make things a little bit easier, not just there, but I think across all of government. As usual, things can always seem as though they're not going as fast as we would like. But I think the effort, as I listen to the Honourable Member for St. Michael North, I think it is clear in terms of the general theme that there are a lot of things in the fire. A lot of moving parts and a lot of things that have been started. What we must do, and I remember sitting on the other side and accusing the last administration of implementation deficits. We must never fall victim to being a part of that narrative. And so if we have to reset at times, or if we have to reprioritize to be able to make sure that we knock off, what I consider the short wins, the things that are going to impact people the most, then those are the things that we need to do. Even in preparing for this debate, there were some who felt that this should be a wide-ranging debate on all things related to roads and road traffic and all the things that are burning issues across the country. My view is that I'm not here to pronounce on things that we're about to do or that will happen in the future. What I have to do is to deal with the things that are in front of me, that are the things that are pressing matters that we can knock off and that we can agree that we've completed. So when we had problems with the infestation of the termites, we knock it off, we got the people back into the BRA office, we tick that checkbox and we move on to something else. If it is that we have to focus on our road rehabilitation, and we now have been pushing on the Scotland district, and we need to hold the meetings, to hold people to account, to get the designs and all of the testing done to be able to get roads constructed in this country, that is what we have to do, come to work every single day to do it. But what I will not do is to pronounce on things just because I'm hearing disgruntlement in some circles from people who ought to know better. What I will not do is pronounce on things that I know are in train, but we're not really ready to be able to say this is how we are going to roll it out. These two amendments this morning are as a result of long discussions and consultations. It makes no sense telling the public that we go and bring them over the last few months, because we knew that we were not ready, whether it was in terms of the drafting or whether it was in terms of getting them to Parliament. We are here now with a position where we have been able to have the consultations, and we are equipped now to be able to say, we've listened to the people, this is what we have done, and once the bill is able to pass through the Senate and be proclaimed, then we are in a position to roll out the approved garages and to designate another set of garages to be able to make the Barbados Licensing Authority more efficient, and also to address the concerns that have been raised by the elderly population. I think Barbadians sometimes are also dealing with, it's becoming cumbersome, all of the issues that sometimes are put out in the public domain. And I feel that we have to pause sometimes and just fix the things that are bothering people. But we got to be honest with the narrative in terms of what we can say we are doing in relation to any aspect of dealing with our roads and our road rehabilitation, as well as all of the constraints that come sometimes in dealing with the complex issues that are confronting us. I thank colleagues for highlighting a lot of the things that we've done, the buses, being able to, again, make a lot of the improvements thus far. I want to thank the Honourable Member for Christchurch West as well for the recommendation in terms of having the approved instructors. Again, these are discussions that are ongoing in the ministry, because we recognize, especially in listening to the driving instructors, that they have a perspective, because they're the ones who are working in the practical field. They are the ones on the ground dealing with the clients as well, coming to the Barbados Licensing Authority. And it requires us to listen to the people to figure out how do we simplify a process. We had an opportunity recently to meet with the Barbados Hotel Tourism Association. The persons who are within the rental car industry, they brought certain suggestions to the table as to how to simplify the process for obtaining an international driving license. And the current Chief Licensing Officer is actively working with them to be able to deconstruct that process entirely, because nowhere else in the world that you go, if I leave here tomorrow and I go to Miami, I want to rent a car, I don't have to go to no licensing authority any other part of the world. I go to Hertz or I go to any of the car rental companies, and they are able to facilitate the issuance of a driver's license permit for me to be able to drive. These are things that, if you operate in a vacuum, you may not appreciate. These are the things that when you step outside of Barbados that frustrate you when you realize that we ought to be doing the same things back home. And while the technologies sometimes do not exist quickly for us to do all of these things, we have to sometimes be able to listen to our publics and our stakeholders to help us to make the changes that can take place. So if it is that we have to make some changes in that area, we have indicated to the Barbados Hotel Tourism Association that we are prepared to listen to their concerns and to start the process, which would require maybe changes to the legislation to allow us to make those changes. But the reality is that we are listening, because it is as frustrating for us as a government when things do not work as it is for the general public to have to complain to us every single day that things are broken, things are not being fixed, there are long lines, customers perhaps the interface with the services and the service providers is not the type of experience that people are proud of. It does not please us in any way when we hear these things. And as ministers, I think sometimes we can't be everywhere to be able to empathize and to out fires. But we try our best, and we hope that perhaps with the leadership that we exhibit, that is able to trickle down across the various ministries, so people understand that they're coming to work to be able to deliver of a service to the people of this country that the people of this country actually deserve. So it's not that we are trying to do what happens overseas, but I think there are some things that we must take from what is happening outside and certainly across the region that can better improve the delivery of service here in Barbados. I want to mention, I know the Honourable Minister, a member for Christchurch West, would have mentioned the issue of the commercial plates. Again, these are all changes you're seeing coming to the fore in terms of the new registration of vehicles for commercial use. Again, we have recognized that at the Barbados Licensing Authority, there wasn't a lot of talking with the public previously. Things just happen, and people just seem to have had to fit into the mode of whatever the changes were. Fortunate, we have a communications team now that has been working with the CLO in order to talk the public through a lot of the changes, to use the social media, to use the CBC and other media houses to be able to get the message out as to the changes. And I believe the most powerful way to effect that change is to have the public speak to their own experiences of the systems, whether it's commercial plates, whether it's the EVR, whatever the system is, let them be the ones to be able to say whether it is working, whether it is efficient, whether it is making the impact that it ought to. We also have the vanity plates that are coming, again, a leftover, I think, from the Honourable Member for Christchurch West. Again, a lot of ideas that we came to the fore with in 2018. And we all know the history of what has transpired in terms of what has slowed us down from executing a number of those things. I have some legislation that is with CPC now. They've had some challenges recently, but I know that the team at CPC, as they're making their changeover because of environmental issues, they are obviously putting a lot of those things that we have for MTW as a priority, and I'm grateful to them for that. And in particular, I know that the EVR is one area that they have been back and forth with the ministry, certainly trying to find a resolution so that we can bring that on stream, certainly by early next year. Things like the databases, trying to make sure that you can do a lot of the services online, as Honourable Minister for St. Michael Northwest, member for St. Michael North spoke to, being able to apply online so that the time spent at the BLA in the hot sun sometimes, because even though we've provided the tent, the outside is so humid that we have to find ways using the technology to allow people to take advantage of services, but to do so in as comfortable a space as they possibly can. How do we do all of these things without financial resources? I think that's really what sometimes the public doesn't fully appreciate. Every ministry, every minister wants improvements in every single area. And what we constantly have to do is to pick off, as I said, the low-hanging fruit, the things that will make the greatest impact, the things that will bring the ease across the country, and to try to make sure that we are not trying to do too many things at the same time and have too many balls up in the air. But generally, I think that the intentions are pure across the ministries. The intention of the government still remains to be able to transform, to give a better way of life for our people. And we remain consistent in the efforts to be able to make those changes. You've heard the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northwest speak to the issues of modernization of Cabinet. But we've also gone a step further to engage with the public officers, especially the senior level public officers. And those meetings have been ongoing at the level of the Cabinet as well as the members, the high-ranking officers in the public service. And why? Because you cannot bring about change at the level of which we are seeking to do without the engagement of the leadership of the various ministries. You can't bring about change if the people who have to go back to their offices do not buy into the notion that change must come. And so we sit in meetings, you know, the public don't realize. I heard the minister say 16 and 18-hour days, and I'm asking my senior ministers, you know, I don't know about any 8 hours that I have to sleep, so I don't know what you are doing. But our time seems to be a little less for the hours that we have to sleep. But in the midst of running ministries, Honourable Prime Minister has been leading the charge of trying to deconstruct and to reconstruct ministries, to ensure that we can digitalize, to ensure that we can modernize, to ensure that we can deliver in a better way. And I will say finally, I know sometimes it seems like we're doing so many things, and perhaps sometimes we're not getting everything that we set about to do done. But when you listen to each of the ministers and the members who spoke earlier, you will realize that across every single ministry, and if every minister spoke this morning, you will hear in their ministries efforts being made to bring about change. But like I said, our love-hate relationship with change sometimes get in the way of us appreciating that you can't leave things the same and expect that they will get better. I want to just, before I close off, made the point that, as we were doing this debate, as we're speaking about roads and road traffic, obviously we had a mass casualty this morning. I know about 60 children and the 2 drivers would have had some injuries as a result of that, and no doubt have suffered the trauma of the impact of 2 electric buses being struck along the Lower Carlton part of the highway. Just to say that, again, my appeal to the public is let us be a bit more observant on the roads. Let us pay attention to other road users as well, because regardless of whatever the circumstances have been this morning, I think we're all feeling the effects sometimes of persons who are close to us being involved in accidents. And I know that tempers sometimes flare as we are going about our daily business on the roads, because we're trying to get to our respective destinations. But we really do have to pay attention to what is happening on our roads, and certainly to be more vigilant as we are either transporting people or whether we are passengers within vehicles as well. So I hope that those persons who have suffered this morning I understand there are minor injuries thus far, but again, that doesn't take away from the trauma of being involved, particularly for the children, in a scenario such as what would have taken place this morning. So again, my heart goes out to them, and prayers to the family that the recoveries and certainly the soft tissue injuries and stuff are not too harsh. With those few words, Mr. Speaker, to beg that this bill be read a second time.
Question that the bill be read a second time. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. That's an order.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Beg to move that Clause 1 do stand part.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
The question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, you say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Beg to Clause 3 do stand part.
The question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
The question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees is reporting the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be read a third time.
Questions that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Road Traffic Amendment Act 2023.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited. How many of them? Honorable member,
I wait.
they passed already.
Huh? But he got called it. He got called it.
In the name of the Honourable Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Transport, Works and Water Resources, to move the second reading of the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order 2018, Validation Bill 2023.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve. Sorry, I beg to move that the bill be read a second time.
Question that the bill be ready a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that the House resolve itself into committee.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 1 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Clause 2 do not stand part.
The question is that clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Thinks the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
The question is that I do now report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, say aye. All honorable members against, say no. He thinks the ayes have it.
How many of the government business?
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Questions that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now passed and cited as the Road Traffic Registration Fees Order 2018, Validation Act 2023.
The question is that this bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With that, we have come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the adjournment of the House until the 24th of October at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 24th day of October at 10 a.m. Yeah, not 6 o'clock. The question is that this honorable chamber be adjourned until Tuesday, the 24th day of October, 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. And we think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 24th day of October, 2023 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.